and the record button. And so this presentation will be recorded so you can view it at your leisure again. And then any of the materials that people are sharing, I will be linking those so that you'll have those to look back on. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or, oh my gosh, I've got to scribble notes and I didn't get that down, there'll be some methods for you to go back and to review the information at your leisure. So our first presentation today is about the legal documents that you should have in order as you move towards retirement. So Robin Lacrimosa is going to share that information with you. And Robin, I hope I have done well by your last name. Thank you for joining us this morning. And am I driving the PowerPoint?
Yes, if you don't mind. Excuse me.
I do not mind at all. And let me share screen.
I was afraid I wouldn't be able to figure out all the details.
Okay, let me stop the music because we don't want to continue to hear that. So give me just a second to make the music go away. Okay, delete that slide and I'm going to share screen again, and we should be in business. Okay, so if you will just, tell me to move forward at when you're ready, I will do that. So thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you. So my name is Robin Lacrimosa. I am a life care coordinator at Kimbrough Law Firm. We have offices in Gainesville and we kind of cover a large region. We are an elder law firm. We're a little bit different than some of the other elder law firms in that we do legal, financial, and care needs, which we'll talk about in a minute. I tend to go kind of fast and furious. I know that you guys probably want to wrap up. So I'm going to go through fairly quickly. I will say everyone's legal situation is so unique that a lot of times it's really, and I am not an attorney. I work for an attorney. So I know enough to get myself into trouble sometimes, but a lot of the things get fairly complicated. And if you have a complex situation, it's usually best to come in for a consultation. One of the things too that I will say is that anyone in our service area, if you choose to come in and meet with us, if you say that you saw me on this presentation or that you heard me present, we normally charge $400 for our consultation fee, which is applied to the balance of the work that we do, and we will waive that. So you'll have a free consultation with the attorney, and we do flat fee billing, which basically means at the time of the meeting, you'll know exactly how much the work will be. We don't do hourly billing or any of that kind of stuff. So that's my little soapbox there. If we'll go to the next slide. So the three most important documents that everyone should have, regardless of whether you're retiring or not, I think everyone should have this, almost regardless of their age, but certainly as you get older, is everyone should have a last will and testament, a financial power of attorney, which is also called the durable power of attorney, an advance directive for healthcare, which you also may have heard called a living will, advance directives, healthcare power of attorney. They go under some different names, but they all basically are the same document. Next slide. So why is the last will important? A lot of people assume that if they die and they're married, that their spouse basically inherits everything. And that is not the way it is here in Georgia. So basically, if you die without a will, your spouse gets a third of it, and then the rest of it is separated amongst your children. And where this becomes important is a lot of families I know maybe have a child who isn't responsible to inherit some money or a house that's not going to be in their best interest to just suddenly get a lump sum. Things get really complicated amongst families. And so I always tell people that these three documents are the best gift you can give your children or your family, because you'll be gone. So any fighting won't impact you, but you have written out your wishes. You've made it very clear what you want to happen. And it sometimes can minimize some of the family drama that happens. The other thing is some families have children that they consider their child, but is not a biological child. And if you don't have a will and testament in place, then that could leave that person out. It gets complicated if you get remarried and you maybe are closer to one of your stepchildren. Maybe you raised that child since they were, young, and they don't necessarily, unless you legally adopt them, they get left out if you don't have a will. So those are why those things are important. If we can go to the next slide. So this basically, I always jump ahead, I'm sorry. So basically, if you don't have a will and testament, what happens? Everything has to go to probate court. Now, everything has to go through probate court, even if you have a will. It just gets much more complicated and usually more expensive for your family, because if you don't have a will, they have to go to probate court. They have to get a court order to sell anything. They have to advertise. Sometimes you've seen in the paper where they'll be like, any descendants of Robin Lacrimosa, please respond by this time. That's someone who didn't have a will in place. And then, like I mentioned, sometimes you unintentionally will leave out children or family members that were important to you, but are maybe not considered biologically your heirs. Next slide. So if you have a will and testament, everything is happy. So they still go to probate, but it's a very simple process. You've named an executor of your will. They basically just have to go to the probate court with your original document. And then whatever you have laid out in your will is how things are done. And even if there's family strife, it doesn't really matter, because you have laid out exactly what you want to happen. So next slide. So the financial power of attorney, what happens if you don't have one? So these power of attorneys only come into play if you are unable to speak for yourself. And also they end when you pass away. So what happens if you don't have a financial power of attorney? If you have a catastrophic event and have a massive stroke and are unable to speak, or are not competent to make decisions for yourself anymore, basically your family or your spouse can't do much as far as your finances go. So if you are married and obviously, you may both be on the checking account, your spouse can pay bills, but if they need to sell the house, and I actually have a family that I'm working with that he cannot sell the house to provide care for his wife. He needs that money because they didn't have a financial power of attorney and she had a massive stroke. Guardianship and conservatorship has to go through the probate court. It's a process. It gets very expensive for the families. And then they basically every year have to report to the courts how they are caring for the person that they have guardianship for. So next slide. So if you have a financial power of attorney in place, that eliminates all of that. There's no need to go for guardianship or conservatorship. There's no reporting to the courts. The attorney, in fact, can then sell property, make decisions, move money around, all of those kind of things. So I think what's interesting is everyone hopes and thinks that they're going to be the person who just doesn't wake up one morning in their bed at home. And statistically, that's not realistic. So even though these are hard conversations, it's important to have these conversations and set something up. You can set up where you have several agents. So you can name, if you have 3 children, you can name your 3 children interchangeably, or you can name them this child. And then if that child can't do it, the next child, and so on. We have people who name their friends. We do have people who name their spouse, but then the only thing with that is to just remember, as you age, if your spouse starts to become ill or develop some cognitive impairments, they can't be your agent anymore, and you may need to revisit that. This financial power of attorney becomes really important when someone gets a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, dementia, or Parkinson's, something that may cognitively impact them. You want to get this document in place while they are still legally competent to sign. So next slide. And then this is your advanced directive for healthcare, your healthcare power of attorney. This is where you name someone to make medical decisions for you if you cannot. There is a section in there where you actually sign off on some of your own wishes. So if you want a feeding tube, don't want a feeding tube, you want to be resuscitated, all of those kind of things. So you do speak for yourself, and then you name an agent to be the person who makes sure that that follows through. I worked for 14 years in the emergency room. This is a really important important document, in my opinion, because especially if something unexpected happens, your family's already dealing with the stress of that. And then when the ER doctors are like, what were their wishes? If you haven't shared that, your children are, or your family is in a situation where they're having to make that big decision. If you have laid out your wishes, it kind of lets them off the hook emotionally to make that decision for you. And nothing happens until you are considered incompetent to make these decisions by 2 doctors. So I say that I am my father's advanced directive for healthcare, and he's always teasing me that I'm going to pull the plug on him, but I can't do that unless 2 doctors say he is incapable of making his own decision. I won't do it. He mostly just teases me, but next slide. Okay, so another thing that we do, and a lot of, even if you're not in our area, you find an elder lawyer, or even a lot of regular lawyers can do this. So asset protection. So this becomes important. What I find with a lot of people is we are, those that do what they were told to do, save your money, buy a house, invest in stocks. That's great. But then what happens if you have a catastrophic event, if you have a massive stroke and need skilled nursing care, then you basically, the way the state has set up the Medicaid benefits is you have to spend down everything that you have. You have to get down to, if you're a single person, just $2,000 a month. And then Medicaid will pay for your care. So there are things you can do to protect your assets. You do have to pre-plan. And so Medicaid does a 5-year look back, but basically what we recommend is that there are ways that you can protect your assets. I know it's really important for a lot of people to be able to leave something to their children or to their grandchildren or to a special charity, something near and dear to their heart. And there are ways to protect your money and still qualify for Medicaid benefits if you had an unfortunate event that you needed that. And those basically, a lot of those things are called trusts. You do have to have someone that you implicitly trust to make good decisions, because basically with the trust, you're moving the assets out of your name and into the name of the trust. And that protects you. It's kind of a loophole in the system. We don't recommend that you just put your assets in your children's names. We will have families that say that, oh, I'm just going to gift my house to my child. You can certainly do that as long as you trust your child. But I had a previous client call me earlier this week, and she was like, my daughter has been single for 20 years. She just married this kook and I don't trust him. And so she's coming in to make changes. So that is one thing. Again, you have to think about the responsibility of your child. Can they handle, receiving some of these assets? The state does what we call a state recovery. So even if you and you and a child jointly own your house, basically, and something happens to you and you have to go into a nursing home, Medicaid says, well, you own half this house. When you pass away, they're going to try to get back what they paid for your care by going after that half of the house. It gets complicated, and I know I'm kind of going through it fairly quickly, but that is something to consider, is if you have assets and it's important to you to be able to leave something to whatever your choice is, it's something to think about. If we can go to the next slide, I think my slides might be out of order. Skip this one. If you'll go to the next one, we're going to come back to that. They got switched around. So here's why it's not just a good idea to transfer assets to your children for protection. It can have capital gains impacts on them. As far as if they sell your house, there's things that you can do to still receive your homestead tax exemption and put them in a better place for when they do sell your house or sell your property. Again, there's a liability issue, which means that if your child owns half your house or owns your house and they get divorced, they have a car accident, they get sued, then you are now in a tenuous position because the house is in the child's name and they're going to come after the child's liability. So that's kind of why those things become important. Karen, if you don't mind going back a slide to the Medicare. Thank you. So this is something I just like folks to be aware of. Medicare is great, but it does not pay for long-term care. Medicare was designed to get you better. Medicare was started many, many years ago when people didn't live as long as they did now. And there wasn't as the progression of Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, where people can live with these diagnoses for 10, 15 years. So just know that Medicare does not pay for long-term care. Medicare doesn't pay for a lot of the home care that you might need if you want to stay home and you need assistance in the home. It is basically, it pays a lot of your medical bills and it will help you with rehab. And then once you're deemed to be as rehabbed as you can be, it's not going to pay. And it actually only pays up to 100 days in a skilled facility. And this becomes important because for someone who private pays in a skilled nursing care is probably about $10,000 a month. So most of us fall into that kind of middle ground where we're not low income enough necessarily to qualify for Medicaid, but we're certainly not rich enough to pay $10,000 a month for skilled care for any amount of time. So that's why those are important. If you'll move on to the next slide and then go past that one to the next one. So I don't know how much this will actually apply to a lot of you, but this is something our law firm is incredibly passionate about. So the VA has a pension program for people who have served during wartime. Do you mind going to the next slide? Perfect. It's been around since 1960. The VA does not publicize this. I can tell you I have been in social work for over 20 years, and I didn't know about this pension until I started working at this law firm. Not every law firm does this. We're pretty specialized in that we do this. But if you'll go to the next slide. So basically, this is a pension. It's not disability. It's not a handout. Some of the veterans, get feel like they're like, I don't want charity. This is a pension that is available to any veterans who served during wartime. These are the specific war times. There are certain dates of service. Anyone can give me a call. I'm always happy to talk to them about this. They have to have been anything besides dishonorably discharged. And some of you don't have to have served a terribly long time. You don't have to have been overseas. Vietnam is the only one. It has a certain section that you have to have been in Vietnam. And then the other rest of the time, it has, I think, almost a 10-year period where you didn't have to be overseas. So I have a gentleman I talked to yesterday who's from Georgia, who basically was just in Georgia the whole time, but he qualifies. You can also qualify as a surviving spouse. So if you were married to a veteran and he's passed away, as long as you were still legally married, doesn't matter if it was your first marriage or your third marriage, as long as you were still legally married to the veteran when he passed, as a surviving spouse, you can qualify. If you'll go to the next slide. So there are three parts that go along with this. First is your dates of service. Second is there is an age and health status that goes along with this. So you have to be at least 65 and not working. So I find this ironic, but the VA basically considers you, if you're 65 or older, you're considered disabled by their standards. So there you go. The spouse can be any age, and you have to need some assistance with activities of daily living. This is a much lower standard than trying to get on disability, either for Social Security or the VA. You need some assistance. So it could be you use grab bars in your shower. It could be you walk with a cane or a walker. It could be you have to have a shower chair, you're on oxygen, any of those kind of things. So this is where sometimes folks are considered too healthy, but we always like to talk about it. Always feel free to give me a call and I can walk you through it. We do try to see, sometimes the veteran may be completely healthy, but the spouse is not, and then they can qualify through the ill spouse. Next slide. And then the third part of it, it says two, but really the third part. So we have the dates of service, we have the needing activities of daily living, and then there's a financial component to it, which you can't be over-resourced. There are some loopholes that we use. So if you are over-resourced, sometimes we can make that work if you meet the health requirement. There are things that we can do where, again, just like we were talking about with the Medicaid planning, you can do some asset protection and pre-planning. So that way down the road, you can qualify for this benefit. The VA does a 3-year look back. So those are kind of some options that you have there. Next slide. And these are the amounts that we're talking about. So it's not spare change. If you are the veteran and you are married and you meet all the three requirements, you would be eligible for $2,431 a month for the rest of your life, tax-free. The surviving spouse is eligible for $1,318. These are all tax-free payments. They go up when Social Security goes up. So in January, these are all going to increase by 8%. So it really makes a big difference. I work with a lot of people who are needing to transition into an assisted living community, and this makes a big difference for them as far as being able to afford that. So yeah, I don't know how many veterans I have or who are, but it's really important to us that we share this message. So even if you are not a veteran, if you know anyone, your neighbor, it comes up in conversation, that's the best way to spread the word, because the VA is not sharing this information very much. Next slide. I'm just going to go through this real quick, because if you're not in our service area, this isn't as relevant to you, but there are some other elder law firms that do this. So life care planning, I had one of my very first clients tell me, I don't know what I don't know. He's very healthy. He's a veteran. His wife is very not healthy. So what our law firm does that's a little bit different is we take a holistic approach. Our originally founding lawyer, Mr. Kimbrough, was meeting with these couples and families and helping them. And they would be like, well, when do I know when it's time for my mom to go into a nursing home? She has Alzheimer's. When do I know, a lot of families, I think, just think you have to go from A to Z. You get a diagnosis and you're in a nursing home. And there are a whole bunch of letters in the alphabet in between A and Z. So what we do is, so he brought us on, we're basically geriatric social workers, and we help people make their way through the system of basically long-term care, whatever that means, whether that's care in the home, whether it's a chronic medical condition, whether you need skilled care. Next slide. So this is just kind of how these things intercept in our firm. So basically people sign on, we're different in this aspect as well. People sign on for a year at a time and then they can keep renewing. So they basically have unlimited access to, I'm one of two care managers, life care managers in the office. We have the legal, the attorneys and the paralegals. And the nice thing about that, so I've been in social work for a long time, but the nice thing about it is that I can go to the attorney and be like, if I spend this money on this care, what kind of impact is that going to have? So we basically are looking from when you come in the door, especially if you have a diagnosis. Not all of our clients need life care planning. A lot of them are just getting their documents in place, and that's totally fine. But the ones that do, the ones that have a diagnosis or have an ill family member, I can look at what their assets are. I can get legal advice from the attorney, and then I use that to figure out what kind of care they need and what we can afford. So next slide. So this is just some of the benefits for it. You get the right care. You can stay at home longer. The caregiver, I always tell the caregivers, you are the most important person. You are the linchpin. So if you are a healthy spouse and you're caring for your ill spouse, really, in a lot of ways, the caregiver is the most important person, because the ill spouse being able to stay at home depends on the caregiver staying healthy. So those are really important things to us. Next slide. And then basically anything that you do in pre-planning puts you in the driver's seat. We all know it's much easier to plan ahead than to address a crisis. You have less options when you're in crisis mode and you're just trying to figure things out. So regardless, whether it's documents, whether it's care needs, the more planning you can do in advance, the better off you are. And we get a lot of phone calls of people who need a power of attorney or need something right away. And unfortunately, our law firm just doesn't work that way. We're booked almost a month out. We do what we can, but we get a lot of phone calls of people who are in the hospital and they need a power of attorney, and we can't always accommodate that as quickly as they need. So it is important to think ahead. Next slide. I think we're almost done. I told you I'm fast and furious. I don't know, Karen, if you wanted to do questions. I saw things popping up in the chat, but I didn't read them. I don't know if anyone has any questions, how you want to handle this.
I think we could do 2 or 3 questions, and I actually have one. With the healthcare directive, how do I ever make sure that the right people have that? So I'm rushed to the emergency room. Do like, and let's pretend I'm in California. How are they going to get access to my healthcare directive?
So a lot of times what I recommend, and this just comes from my time in the ER, is that you make sure your local hospital, whatever hospital you normally go to, and your doctor's office has it. And then if you're in California and you have an event and you need that document, your family would be able to say, call Northeast Georgia, and they will send it to them. The other thing is I have some clients who are caregivers for their very medically frail spouses, and they actually keep a folder on their phone, and they have a phone tree. So they have children and they have shared this folder. That's the great thing about smartphones now. So you can pull it up on the phone. I will also tell you, honestly, depending on the hospital, a lot of times if the family's in agreement, the doctors aren't necessarily, unless it's like a really tenuous situation, a lot of times the doctors are going to follow the family. It's when the family is opposing, or there's one family member who says, I know that mom didn't want this, then it gets a little bit more complicated. But that's probably the best thing, is to make sure that they have them at your hospital and that someone has them on their phone. The healthcare power of attorney, they don't have to have the original. The durable power of attorney, financial power of attorney, you have to hang on to that original document. If you lose your original document, a lot of times you can come back, to the office and we can give you a copy, but you really need that original one for some of that stuff.
There is a question in the chat of, could you review what areas your firm serves and how to contact your firm?
Sure. So we serve basically anywhere an hour outside of Gainesville, an hour outside of Athens. So we go down, I have a client in Greensboro. We have some clients in Hart County. I think I have clients in Dahlonega and Dawsonville. We go over to Lawrenceville. It kind of depends. And here's the thing. So we can always do your consult via Zoom. Where it gets complicated for people, the thing that you just want to be aware of, excuse me, is that you're going to have to come into the office at some point to sign documents. When COVID was happening, we were allowed to do virtual signings. They're not letting us do that anymore. So even if you're a little outside of, maybe what you normally would want to drive every day, we can do a Zoom consult, do some of the Zoom work, but just know that you're going to have to come to the office for signings at some point. Now, with the life care planning, that gets a little bit different as well. We still serve that really wide area, but we don't offer care planning for places that I'm not familiar with, mostly because I don't have those connections. I haven't been in that community. I don't know the home care aides, but there are a couple other life care lawyer firms, and we can certainly tell you if there's one in your area.
And as I mentioned, some of you had come on afterwards. Within the week, you'll get an email from me that has all the presenters' information and a link to this video, because we are recording this, and a link to all the handouts, the presentations. So Robin's contact information you will get directly in the email.
Well, and I can tell you, so the office phone, regardless of which office you're calling, it's the same phone number, is 706-850-6910. And then my email is all lowercase. It's just Robin with an I, don't spell it with a Y, at kimbrolaw.net. But yeah, I think my contact information too is on that first slide when you get access to the documents.
So is there one more generic question that would be good for the entire group? I know we all have
Thank you.
Specifics that apply to us, but is there something that anybody would like to ask for the good of the whole? I think I've done the 7-second hang time that we're supposed to wait after we ask a question. So Robin, I'll also in a minute put your email in the chat, and I know people can reach out to you that way too. I thank you for going through and sharing this morning. And every time I hear these presentations about the documents I should have in order, I go through and go through the guilt of not having my documents be top notch at this point in time. So thank you for hopefully stirring a fire, at least under me, and hopefully other individuals too. So you're more than welcome to stay. I know also you have a Saturday morning and a weekend ahead of you, but thank you today for giving your time and your talent and sharing with us. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me, and y'all just give me a call. I'm always happy to answer questions.
Great.
Right.
Thank you so much. Well, our next presentation, I put a link to the agenda in the chat, is we're going to talk a little bit about how TRS operates. This isn't the same thing. Later on in the agenda, Mike Zorum, who is a TRS employee, will be sharing about retirement and TRS and the various options that you have. But Dan Powers, who has attended TRS meetings for, it seems, decades now, is going to be talking to us a little bit about the structure of TRS. And also on the call with us is Debbie Simons, who is a past president of GAE, a GAE retired member, and the current chair of the TRS board. And the reason we do this segment on the structure and a little bit of the history of TRS is because you know that one of the main reasons you have stuck in public education is so that you can get your pension. And we all know that there are those naysayers who want to change TRS and usually not for the better. And so to me, it's very important that all retirees who are going to be drawing a pension know something about the TRS system, so that if something arises in the General Assembly and changes TRS for the worse, or that would change TRS for the worse, that we can all be rallying around that and doing our due diligence. So hopefully you will know a little bit more about the TRS system after Dan's presentation. So Dan, I am driving here, hopefully.
You are. I see. Welcome.
Good. Let's do.
And before we get started, I just want to invite Debbie to jump in at any point, especially if she sees an inaccuracy. I feel a little outclassed when we got the president of the board of trustees here, but I hope she'll put her input at any point.
Well, and the TRS board, and sorry for being verbose, Dan, meets every other month. And guess what? They meet 10:30 on a Wednesday morning in Atlanta. You're more than welcome to attend the meetings. But what are active employees doing at 10:30 on a Wednesday morning, but doing their jobs in the classroom and doing their jobs for public education? So one of the things that the GAE retired organization does is monitor TRS, just so that we know what's going on and we can share the information with others. So Dan.
Okay, that first slide is, you'll notice the yellow block up in the upper right-hand corner, and that's where you log in. And the way you log in is you have an account. So if you don't have an account, you need to create an account by going to that website at the bottom in yellow and creating your own account. And that way you can, well, you can look at all kinds of things. There's a whole dashboard across the top there, and they have it for active and retirees. So it's a very handy website, especially if you're thinking about retirement or you're interested in what the TRS is about. So be sure that you open your account. That can be done at any time. I don't want to talk a whole lot about the 87 billion in assets. We we peaked out last year, I believe it is a 102 billion. And because of the volatility of the market and concerns over various economic issues such as inflation, there's been a lot of fluctuation. So recently it has gone down, while you could say significantly, if you look at just the numbers. But as has been talked about on numerous occasions, especially at the meetings by the financial department, that number still is way above what we were pre-pandemic, and we are in very good financial shape. The 87 billion, I don't know if that's current. I know that had a terrible week this week, so I imagine by next meeting that probably has changed, and maybe hopefully it'll even gone up. But again, don't be too concerned about, especially about newspaper articles. Apparently the Atlantic, the AGC just loves to jump all over losing revenues because of the volatility of the market. But actually, we're in very good shape. You can see by the numbers, we have it's not what it used to be, but we have a fairly good ratio between active contributing members and those who are retired. Actually, the number of actively contributing members has gone up in the last year or two, in part because of incentives, especially financial ones coming out of the governor's office. Again, Debbie, feel free to jump in. This is a lot of this is the same information, other than you'd probably be most interested in what the average monthly benefit is. And you can see that it has gone up. And one reason it has gone up is because one of the great things we have about the TRS is we have a semi-annual cost of living, a COLA increase of 0.15% each year. So it amounts to 3%, but it's compounded semi-annually. So we get a significant boost over the years. I can tell you now that I make just about what I did when I retired. And this is a very unique thing in the United States. I believe we are the only state that gives what amounts to almost an automatic 3% raise each year. It is tied to the consumer price index, but of course, you don't have to worry about that with the problem with inflation right now. Anyway, 59 is the average age of retirement, and you can see what the payroll is.
And I will say, if it's okay, Dan, that the average service credit, most people think, oh, everybody stays in the profession to 30 years to retire. And that's not necessarily true, because we are a matriarchal profession. People have taken time out for child rearing. And so, again, it's not 30 years of retirement that everybody ends up with. And the average age of payment means that of all the TRS checks going out, the average age of people receiving those checks is 71 years of age. And then 99% of the people do the electronic funds transfer.
That's actually probably 99.9. There's probably about 5 or 6 people that actually want to see their hard check these days. It's just some people are like that. This is the options you have at retirement. I think the TRS guy is going to go into that with some detail. I'll just say that most people take the maximum benefit. There are other options where you can take a lower amount, and when you pass on, your spouse will get what amounts to your pension, or a good portion of it. But most people take the full benefit. Okay, we're going to go into the technicalities of defined benefit and defined contribution. Are we starting with that, or are we doing the TRS formula first?
We'll talk about all three, and let's start with defined benefit and defined contribution.
So I thought there was a new slide. There you go. Defined benefit versus defined contribution. It just means that you find out, you know what you will receive when you retire. And it's a very defined formula. As it says there, it's a constant income stream guaranteed for life. Defined contribution is like the IRAs and the various things that are given in the private sector and some school systems, where you can contribute and a financial manager takes care of your income, or you do it yourself. And it is not guaranteed, as many people found in 2008 when we had the repression, or whatever they called it, which was a severe recession. And a lot of people lost their life savings and did not have a guaranteed life income. The defined benefit employer is responsible for investing the contributions. In this case, the employer is TRS, not your local board of education. Why did you mute me?
I am sorry, Dan, I'm mucked up. So,
Defined contribution employee is the employee is responsible for investing contributions. And I have a couple of friends that are probably very capable of investing, but I'll guarantee you I am not. If I ever pick a stock, I'll let everybody know not to buy it. So you got to be so up to date. You got to be so careful. You have to know what you're doing, or you got to have a very, very trusted financial manager knowing what he's doing to invest your contributions. So it's such a relief to know that in our system of TRS, somebody is looking out for us, and they're very knowledgeable, and they've got a tremendously wonderful track record, as you can see over the years. I don't know if we'll get to that, but at some point, every meeting they show the trends over the years, and it's always been upward. I mean, there's a couple of dips, like in 2008, and currently where we're having the volatility of market and the pandemic. But for the most part, it's just been a wonderful a ride for anybody that's in TRS. The amount is known. There's a formula. We'll go into that in a minute. You'll know exactly what you're going to get based on your years of service, your highest 24 months of income, and the multiplier of 2%. Defined contribution, obviously it's unknown. If you're lucky and you do well in your investment strategies, you'll have a nice income. And if nothing happens to the economy, that income will remain. But the point is, there are many violent winds out there that can cause a lot of change. And so your income is going to be unknown. Inflation protection, as I mentioned, the COLA happens twice a year. Survivor benefits are an option if you choose that as one of your options for retirement. Obviously, the other is not inflation protected because you're at the vagaries of the stock market completely. And survivor benefits obviously are not built in if you don't know what your income is going to be, or if you'll have an income. Obviously, survivors don't know what it's going to be. And here are the reasons that we should be happy with the defined benefit. One is recruitment. A lot of young people aren't really thinking about retirement until it's brought to their attention. And sometimes they don't even think about that until well into their careers. But if they are on the ball, and certainly once they've reached that magic 15 years, they do think a lot about retirement. So recruitment is a valuable, the TRS is a valuable recruitment tool. Retention, and again, as you build in the years, you're more and more likely to stay with it. So therefore, we have experienced professionals that stay in the profession because they know at the end of this long trail, there are rewards. And I was just talking with the guy I walk with every Saturday morning. He's in in the corporate world, and he was talking about, you know, how valuable that retirement plan is. When I've described it to him, he says, you know, that would probably take $1.5 million to have that as your income base, to get that kind of income on a monthly basis. And, you know, it's a very valuable tool. And finally, of course, retirement with dignity and honor. Sometimes it doesn't stretch far enough, but in most cases, if you've been wise in your decisions and choices along the way, the TRS will let you live in dignity and honor. And now we get to the formula, and we have a couple of examples. Most people do work, well, I guess not most people do work 30 years, but 30 years of credible service lets you retire at any age. If you're less than 30, then you need to wait until you're 60. And at least you are vested, as they say, if you have 10 years of credible service and you've reached the age of 60. Years of credible service. And let's, I think the example, which you'll see, will be, the first one will be 30 years, the 2% multiplier, and then your highest average salary was 24 months, right? Did I get it right?
24 consecutive months. Some
Right.
people think that is your last 2 years. Not necessarily true. I have a colleague, she worked in the Savannah board office before returning to the classroom. And so those are her, obviously, her highest 2 years.
And that will give you your maximum benefit. And then I think we have an actual example. 30 years times the 2% multiplier times what's your 24 months highest salary. And that would give you $30,000 per year, or $2,500 per month.
If your highest 24 consecutive months was the average of 50,000 per year.
Right. And for those that are really enjoying their life in the classroom, or as administrators more often, you could put in 40 years. Your salary would probably be, well, in these days, I'm sure it'd be higher than 60,000, but whatever. For the example, you would get $48,000 per year based on a $60,000 income, and that would be $4,000 a month. I can tell you that once you're in the system, and that cost of living, the COLA, starts kicking in each year, you'll eventually get back to your original salary.
And 40 years, if you go beyond that, you don't get to plug in any higher number here. We have a colleague who I think is at 48 years of service, but when she retires, it still will only count as 40 years. She doesn't get to put in 48 years to do the arithmetic.
I failed to mention that. Unused sick leave can now be applied to that as part of your service numbers. And 9 months of sick leave equals 1 year of service. And I guess that still depends on, is that statewide, or is it depend on the local system on how many days you can build up?
It's statewide.
Okay, so when I retired, we did not have that benefit, and I had to use up my sick leave before I actually retired. But that gave me another 6 months of credible service.
And when I retired, I had 29 years in the classroom, plus a year plus of unused sick leave. So my benefit was calculated at 30 plus
Okay,
years.
I don't know if there's any veterans that are listening in, but if you have military service, that will also, you can buy back that those years of military service, and they will apply to your retirement years, as well as years in other systems, other states. You can buy service years. Oh, we have so many problems with House Bill 109. This is but one of them. They want to take the new teachers and not let them use their sick leave credit. Of course, they have to do that to new teachers because the courts have found that our retirement with the TRS is a contract and it's inviolable, violent. And so they can't take it away from us without some real legal ramifications, but they can apply it to new teachers. And most of the bills will always be that are trying to undercut what we have will always be for incoming teachers. But fortunately, you have a retired 150,000 teachers and a lot of active teachers that are looking and watching what they do. And when we come to the rescue of the new teachers whenever they raise these kinds of detriments to the retirement system. And I think I've talked about this, but once again, you get 1.1% COLAs in January and July. And it's very helpful in terms of staying with inflation, obviously, but it certainly helps your standard of living with honor and dignity. And
Dan, can I add one thing about the cost of living?
yeah,
I think something that people do not realize is that like I retired in 2008. So my cost of living is dependent upon what that figure is in 2008. So for the most part, I mean, we've never had any group of teachers that was not awarded a COLA because of CPI, unless it was ones that had just retired for the first 6 months. So the beauty of this thing is because it's tied to the cost of living of 2008, the whole economy would have to collapse before I would not be able to receive a cost of living. So you can pretty well 99.9% of the time depend upon a cost of living once you've been retired longer than 6 months.
I
And
did not
that's-
know that. I thank you. That's good information. I'm sure I should know it, but I'm glad you brought it to the attention.
I don't know how many people really, I mean, I was on the board for several years and voting on the cost of living, you know, as a trustee before this whole discussion came up. I did not know it. I had no idea. So occasionally, we've only had 3 times, I believe, since the inception of the cost of living back in the 90s, that for a 6-month period of time, a group of retirees did not get that cost of living the first time. So this is pretty much an assured thing for the rest of us once you get beyond that 6-month period.
Good information.
And the 1.5%, as Dan alluded to, is more than 3% a year.
Right.
So
But if the good old House Bill 109 had its way, it would be just a single 3%, which is slightly less, as you said. It's not the end of the world, but it's different and lower. Pension reform. These are all things that can be affected and can affect how your income at retirement, after retirement particularly, could be affected. And I'll let you read them yourselves unless somebody has a specific one they want to go over, meaning either Karen or Debbie. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. Would somebody like to talk about the hybrid plan?
just at one point in time, there was legislation, I believe, introduced that would make part of what was invested be in a defined contribution plan along with defined benefit. And again, that piece of legislation was defeated.
That is the teacher retirement system. There is sometimes conflict between the various education associations, whether it be administrators, teachers, whatever groups. But one thing that unifies everybody is tampering with the pension. These pension reforms come out regularly from the right wing, which we'll talk about in a minute here. But whenever they start really fooling with it, that brings out the teachers in mass. And, you know, we're talking 100,000, not counting families really, that can affect any election. So when they really start tampering with the pensions and the retirement system, it brings out the best of us in terms of political action. This is legislature 101, and biennium. It means that retirement legislation has a fiscal impact can only be introduced. Any legislation, I think, that has fiscal impact can only be introduced during the first year. So if you can get it defeated the first year, then you don't have to worry about it the second year. But usually, what you have a 2-year fight. This year, I think with the House Bill 109, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we did get that out of the way the first year, and I don't think anything was brought up this year. And I don't know if it could be.
We're going to be starting the first year of the 2-year biennial. So again, we'll be vigilant with what does get introduced this year, and then the actuarial studies that might follow thereafter.
This was supposedly, and I'm going to let Debbie talk about this because she's talked about it several times. It's essentially a non-starter. It's not controversial, but would you like to say a couple things about it, Debbie?
Well, it's not controversial now, but for years, GAE and our members have fought against alternative investments because it wasn't well defined. However, now we have in-house staff within TRS, as well as some very specific guidelines, such as we cannot spend more than 1% of our budget a year to invest in the venture into any of the alternatives. And we watch it very closely. I will tell you that the one asset class, being the alternative investments, was the only one of our 3 asset classes that had a positive return since January. So as long as it's used carefully, judiciously, and monitored constantly, it is a very positive addition to our assets to be able to invest in. You couldn't have told me that 10 years ago, but now with all the guardrails that we have in place, I feel not only very comfortable, but very confident that it's going to be a very positive addition to our asset classes.
Thank you. House Bill 385, back to work. This is post-retirement stuff. And right now, from what I remember of the last couple of times I've been at the meetings, there isn't a whole lot of enthusiasm about going back to work these days. But there is legislation, and I believe now you wait 1 year and you can go back full time. And I think at any point, well, I think there's time also for part time. I can't remember if that's 6 months or a year also, but you can go back to work should you wish to, basically.
With this piece of legislation that is now law, in going back to work and getting your salary in addition to your TRS benefit check, you have to have 30 years of credible service. So we're going to try and work to have that go away, the 30-year part, because as you remember, the average member, doesn't have 30 years of experience. And if you were to go back to work after you have retired, it doesn't increase your years of credible service at all. You just have the opportunity to get your TRS check and your salary, which would be a nice little pocket of money should you choose to go that route.
How is TRS funded? This is always an interesting thing. We got three buckets. Bucket number one is our contributions, the employee contributions. And that's what that 6% that comes out of your paycheck each month is pays into that. Bucket number two is your employee or employer, I misspoke, employer contribution, which currently is of almost 19.6, Debbie, 19.6. They add that into the jug. But if you look at the third one, bucket number three, that's what we're talking about with TRS. Those are investments. And you could see that's a pretty full jar. And I think next slide actually breaks it down further. No, that this is what this is the breakdown between employer rate and employee rate, which we just talked about. You know, it's 19.81% now for the local system, and ours has been pretty constant since 2012.
And it's in Georgia law that the employee rate can only be at this point between 5 and 6%. They can't, the legislature, as the law is written, can't say, oh, it's going to be 12% of your salary.
And now we highlight the investments, and you can see this is the trend of the rolling 12 months. And sad to say, because of the volatility of the market, it's gone down considerably. But then if you look at it over the 12-year span, the second chart below, the lower chart, you could see that overall it has still been a steady rise. And despite the rocky years of pandemic and now economic winds that are blowing somewhat violently, we have another dip, but overall it's still well above what it was 10 years ago.
And I'll explain this one, Dan, if it's okay, is
Go
that
right ahead.
investment income does account for the majority of what you're going to get from TRS over your lifetime. Let's just pretend this teacher retired in 2010, age 59, and 8 years later was paid out the $370,000 there. Well, in 2 to 3 years, everything that the employee has contributed is gone. So of that $370,000, only 12% comes from the employee contribution, double that about from the employer contributions. But you can see the mainstay of what the defined benefit plan is paying out is through the investments. And the investments in TRS, it's a top secret floor. Debbie won't even show me the handshake to get there at the TRS building. And we have a great set of investors who are obviously managing the fund quite well. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most impressive things you'll get when you go to one of the meetings is the amount of dedication and professionalism and just savvy investing that they do. And I think we should be very pleased with the staff that guards us and guards our pensions.
And let me share a video as we wind up this segment from TRS, who has a wealth of multimedia information on the website if you haven't, again, taken a look at that. But here we go, I hope.
Educators do more than just teach. They fulfill a promise. a promise to serve and strengthen our communities, all throughout their careers. At the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia, we think educators deserve a promise too. That's why we're dedicated to helping them retire with confidence and financial security, so they can impact
Sorry.
Okay.
Here we go.
their community even beyond their careers. In 1943, the State General Assembly established TRS to provide retirement security to those who dedicate their lives to educating Georgia's children and adults. Today, TRS is the largest public retirement system in Georgia. In fact, with $80 billion in assets, we're ranked in the top third of all pension funds. We manage hundreds of thousands of active retirement accounts. And while TRS pays more than $5 billion a year in benefits to retired members and their beneficiaries, approximately $8 billion is pumped back into the local communities in the state of Georgia. You see, TRS doesn't only help teachers, we also help to boost our local economy. Every dollar paid in state and local pension benefits goes on to generate an even greater total output. Say our retiree receives a pension payment, then uses it toward the purchase of a home. From contractors and builders to mortgage brokers and real estate agents, everyone involved is put to work, earning and spending money in our local economy. That in turn means even more business, more hiring, more jobs, all right here in Georgia. And remember, the majority of funds in our members' accounts comes from investment income. But unlike 401k and 403b plans, pensions aren't tied to the stock market. Whether stocks go up or down, TRS benefits stay the same from month to month. For stability retirees can count on. Our teachers' careers start with a promise. With the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia, their retirement does too. Because the way we see it, a pension is a promise our members can rely on and retire on. Visit trsga.com and learn more today.
And
Okay.
that is it.
There is a question in the chat room that I think is a little bit too technical for me. I'm not quite sure. And I'm going to ask Debbie to, oh, you did, okay.
Transform healthcare.
That's fine. That's it then. Good morning.
And Sheila, I did respond to you in the chat. I hope that made sense. If not, let me know.
I was confused about if you withdraw your benefits from another state, do you
Well,
still get
it
those
may-
years, or can you buy them back?
Well, okay, I'll just use my own specific example.
I'm actually here. I'm here.
Okay,
I'm sorry. I was trying to get my mic back on. So Mr. Powers, what I was asking, withdrawing, meaning when I left one state under the circumstances and needing the money, I withdrew my retirement that I had earned from that state. So when I came here, although Georgia accepted my years of experience, it was, I guess, like I was starting over with retirement.
and that is correct, Sheila. I moved to Georgia. I had 2 years in Texas. I withdrew that money. I had 3 years in Louisiana. I withdrew that money from those 2 states. When I came here to Georgia and I got vested after 10 years, I bought back those 5 years, which means that I had to pay the employee and the employer contribution as actuarially determined. It's a very individual situation. Because I bought back those years, I then was able to use the 5 years to attach on to the 29 years that I taught here in Georgia. But you have to buy it back because the system has to have the money to pay you for all those years that you worked in another state.
And
Does that
if I
make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. Because I've heard people saying things like, from my friends who are military, retired, and just other teachers, I've heard them use the term buyback.
I was going to add the addendum for veterans. They could buy back up to 4 years. And it's an incredible value because you buy back the years that you were in service. So in my case, I was buying back what the retirement costs were in the 1960s, even though I was buying it back in the 1990s. So it was a tremendous bargain is what I'm saying. So for the military, and I don't know if that applies to out of state, Debbie, you could answer that. Did you have to pay for what?
And Sheila, and I also think there's another question in the chat. You would need to contact Georgia TRS, talk to a counselor, and they will give you an estimate and they will give you the procedure. And it's kind of a long system because what I had to do was TRS Georgia sent me the paperwork. I then had to send it to Texas and in Louisiana and walk through the fact that I could verify that I actually taught there. Then they filled out the paperwork and sent it directly to TRS Georgia. In one instance, Texas was money on the dollar, and I got that information back within a month. It took me almost a year to get it back from Louisiana. So don't
say that, because that's actually where I'm from, and that's where I was to get it from.
Well, maybe they're better now than when I did it. But you could choose to just buy 1 year back. You don't have to buy all of it. And so you could make a choice of, I think I'll just buy 1 year or 2 year or 3 years. And the TRS counselors can set you up with a very individual plan. And so that you can see, and I will take, my first year to teach was in 1975. Okay, folks, let that go. But to buy back my 1975 year was $7,000. To buy back the 5th year after that was $17,000 for 1 year. So what I'm saying is, the earlier you decide to buy back any time, the better off financially you're going to be. But Georgia will give you an estimate year by year on how much each year will cost you. And that's, quite frankly, that's because, in 1975, I think I made $8,000 for the year. So my salary was a lot lower and everything else. But the only way that you can get this kind of information is to call TRS, talk to a counselor. They will work with you, and it won't be a one and done. This probably will take a couple of meetings to get all this information together. But you individually need to contact TRS number, and our counselors will work with you.
Good point.
Okay, thank you so much. And the interesting thing is, I didn't know so many people fell into that category. I used to be embarrassed and thought it was just me.
Oh, a lot of people.
And Debbie, thank you so much for being here and for sharing. And again, later on in our program, Mike Zorum, who is a specialist from TRS, will be going into more detail about the logistics of retirement and your retirement options. But as Dan started this presentation, if you haven't gone to the TRS website yet and created your own individual account, please do that. And please like the TRS Facebook page, and along with the GAE Retired Facebook page. But these are great resources as you go into retirement. So Debbie, Dan, thank you so much. And we have with us, speaking of retirement and money, Anise Norman from the Social Security Administration. And she's going to be talking about Social Security and a little bit about Medicare And so Anise, I am going to share screen if that's okay. And you are on. Now I have to make sure Anise did not get booted out. If you are, let me just check. Oh, she has been having computer issues this morning. She and I have been dialoguing back and forth. And so I think she did get booted out again. So let's go through and readjust and be flexible in what we're doing. And we're going to talk about an aspect of Social Security, and we'll hopefully get Anise back to join us here. But we're going to talk about something called the GPO WEP, which it's kind of like Anise will give us information about Social Security, but the GPO WEP may take it away, not the information, but the Social Security. So we have two people with us, Judy Polachek, who's a GAE retired member, and Vivian Brooks, also GAE retired, who are both part of the GAE retired legislative committee. And they will share about GPO WEP. And if you haven't heard about GPO WEP, well, here's your introduction, and we are just the messengers. So Judy, Vivian, let's see if, make sure you are here. Judy, you are muted.
Yes.
Good, good to hear your voice. And Miss Vivian, you are muted. And so I'll start the presentation. And Judy, you want me to talk for a little bit, or you want to talk about?
Okay. Vivian was actually going to do the initial presentation describing what they are, and I was going to talk about the realities of it after
Okay.
that. Is Vivian not on?
Vivian is here, I think. And let's just, Vivian, you are muted. People are coming and going. It's kind of like the land of Oz. People are coming and going very quickly this morning. And Vivian, go ahead.
I was going to say it's possible that she thought since our portion didn't start until 11 or a little after that she didn't need to be here right away.
Gotcha. Well, I'll go ahead and start. And hopefully Anise too will join us from Social Security. 40 credits are needed. Up. Here comes Anise back. Sorry about we know technology is our friend. So let me stop this and see if Anise will talk to me here.
And
Hey, Miss
Karen knows
Karen.
I know the realities of it.
Can
Anise,
you hear me, Miss Karen?
I can, Miss Anise. So let me revamp here. And hopefully technology will keep you with us at this point in time.
Well, I'm on my cell phone now. I'm giving up on my laptop. We're having issues this morning, so we're going to go a different route.
Well, that works for me. And if I can help you kick your computer to the curb, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay, just let me know once you pull up my slides, and I'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, we are at the beginning, and here we go. And Anise, thank you for joining us this morning. I appreciate it.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. And let me just tell you this. Normally, I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm actually in the office this morning. So as I was driving in and I go through Chick-fil-A, they get my order wrong. So that was an omen of how it was going to go today. And they never get my order wrong. But we're going to get through this. So just bear with me. One of the things that I want everyone to understand is that Social Security, it was never designed to replace your pre-retirement income. It is only going to replace approximately % of your income. So that means you need to be thinking about, your other sources of income, and you need to be adding it all up to try to figure out, will it be enough to sustain you in retirement? Because most financial planners will tell you that you're going to need somewhere between 70 to 80% of that pre-retirement income to live comfortably in retirement. And I'm hoping that by the end of my portion of this presentation today, you'll have just a little bit better understanding of Social Security. So if we can go to our next slide, please. On the next screen, what you should see here is how to contact us, where you get the most current information about Social Security. You go to our webpage at socialsecurity.gov, and that's www.socialsecurity.gov, or you can go to ssa.gov, and this is where you're going to get the most current information. On this screen here, I think you're about 2 slides ahead. There you go, Ms. Karen.
Wait a minute. Okay. This is the one that says coronavirus.
Yes, ma'am. But I think at the time we put that up because our offices are now open for walk-in traffic. But let me just warn you, right now, a lot of our offices are still working under limited staff in the office because we still are required to kind of social distance and stay away from each other. So some people are teleworking while other people are in the office, and we kind of rotate in and out about who's going to be in the office. The best way to contact us is by telephone, because it may be something simple that we can help you with over the telephone to save you a trip. How you're going to find out about how to contact your local office is from this main Social Security page. You're going to scroll to the bottom of the screen, and at the bottom there will be some blue boxes, and one will say contact us. When you click on that link, that will take you to a second landing page. You scroll to the bottom of that page and you'll see a blue box that says office locator. When you click on that link, next slide please, you should see how to locate your servicing office. What you need to do here is simply input your zip code and hit the locate button. And that's going to bring up the information for your local servicing Social Security office. It'll give you their address, but most importantly, it'll give you that local office telephone number. And of course, on the screen, we always give you the national 800 number, that 800-772-1213 number, so that you can contact us and let us know what your issue is so that we could help you to get that resolved. Now let's go to our next slide, please. So when you're thinking about retiring, what do you need to know? Well, first of all, you need to understand that this is a very personal decision, because what's right for your coworker, your brother, sister, or your neighbor may not necessarily be the right time for you to figure out when you want to receive your Social Security benefit. Because one of the things you need to think about, at what age do I want to start to take that cash benefit from Social Security? The earliest age that you can start to receive your Social Security benefit is at age 62. Keep in mind that if you take that benefit early at age 62, that is a permanent reduction on the benefit over the lifetime that you would receive it. And then the only potential increases that you would receive are going to be those COLA or cost of living increases. And those are going to be determined by the Bureau of Statistics. That's usually like late September, October timeframe, where they're going to go back and look at the last 3 quarters of inflation to make that determination as to whether or not inflation has risen to the level that would warrant an increase in benefits. And if so, then beneficiaries would see that increase in the check that they would receive in January of the following year. Another thing to think about is, do you plan to work after you start to receive that cash benefit from Social Security? Because if you do, and you are under your full retirement age, and your full retirement age is going to be based upon your year of birth, that means that there's going to be earnings limits that you need to be aware of. Another thing to consider is Medicare. Do you plan to enroll in Medicare? We're not going to force you to enroll. If you do not enroll in Medicare at first opportunity, that you can enroll, and then you come back later and say, you know what, I changed my mind, I want to enroll in Medicare now. One of the things you need to understand is that you may be subject to a 10% penalty for every 12 months that you waited or delayed in enrolling in Medicare. And then finally, I want to talk about some tools that will be helpful to you when you're making this decision and determining when is the right time for you to enroll in Medicare, or even to start to receive that cash benefit from Social Security. So if we can take a look at our next slide, please. And this is going to be where I'm going to promote our My Social Security account.
Anise, you are
With our My
close.
Social
Anise, you are close to breaking up a little bit from time to time. So maybe you can hold your phone towards the window or something like that.
Okay, let me see, because I'm
Oh,
kind
that's
of close to a window here. I'll go stand by the window, see if that
Okay.
helps.
Sorry about
Okay.
this. Don't buy
Okay.
a lotto ticket today.
No, today is not a good day for me with everything that's going on, but we're going to get through this. I am positive. Okay, so with our My Social Security account, if you do not have a My Social Security account, it is very easy for you to create one. You can log in and create the My Social Security account if you have a Gov, or if you have an email. This will help you to get through, verify your identity, and then it will take you straight to your My Social Security landing page. And when you hit that My Social landing page, you're gonna know that you've arrived, because you're gonna see some of your information up to age 70. So let's just take a look at our next slide and that you can do behind the My Social Security portal.
Okay, and Anise, you're still breaking up a little bit, for me anyway, from time to time.
Okay, we'll see here.
That's better, actually.
Okay, our next slide. Well, I'm just kind of propped up on the window now in the office, because normally I would be at home. Some of the things that you can do here is that now if you need a replacement Social Security card, you can log into your My Social Security account. And then you're going to get some information from your state issued driver's license or ID, and then you'd be able to, we'd be able to process that request for a replacement Social Security card. You can be able to see your information, such as when you hit that landing page, as I mentioned earlier, you see your estimated benefit at age 62, full retirement age, and up to age 70. But one of the things that I usually recommend to people is to check your earnings history. This is an option for you to look at each year where you have reported earnings to Social Security, and what it will show the gross amount of those earnings reported to us. If you notice that there is a discrepancy, that something's wrong, that you're earning not right, well, there is an option available now where you can upload either a W-2 or a tax return to Social Security. That way we can get that year corrected for you, so that by the time you do get ready to from Social Security, those new earnings may make a difference in the calculation for you. Other things behind the portal. If you need a verification letter, say for example, you're trying to purchase a new home and you need proof of what you're receiving from Social Security, you can log out and then print this from the comforts of your own home. Other things that you can do behind the portal, if you need to start or change your direct deposit, if you need to update your address or telephone number, you can do all of this from your My Social Security portal. Also, you have an option here where you can look at and review the letters, and we call those notices that you've received from Social Security. You can get those here as well. And of course, if you need a replacement Medicare card, there's a link and an option for you to get that replacement Medicare card. If you filed an application for retirement, disability, Medicare, you can also track the status of your application through your My Security account, because it'll tell you, like, say, for example, your option say 2 for process, and then you will see that letter or that notice here. Now, another thing that you would be able to do to your My Social Security account is that you would be able to use, we have a new calculator here that lets you utilize our slide.
Anise? Anise? Anise, I've lost you again. Yep, you have dropped off the call. So why don't we, if it's okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm hoping Anise will come back momentarily. It is 10:32. Let's take just a 5-minute bio break and we will see if she has rejoined us. And if not, then we'll move on with the rest of our presentation. And again, I apologize. This is up here. She is back. Let me just see if this is any better. This is not usually what happens during this segment. And she is.
I'm here, Karen.
Yay, you are here. Good.
I went outside this time. I'm gonna try something. I'm gonna sit in the car. Okay.
This is
Let's see.
nice.
We're going to keep trying this. Okay, where was I? Let's see. I was talking about you can use the calculator where you can use the sliding scale to kind of figure out, you know, say, for example, if you decided that instead of wanting to retire at, say, maybe your full retirement age of 67, but maybe you want to retire at 65 and 11 months. That way you enter that information in, and that way it would tell you exactly what that estimated benefit would be for you. But there's just a lot of great things that you can utilize or do behind the My Social Security portal. Next slide, please. Our agency did create some new fact sheets for individuals starting in 2021. One of the newest ones that we kind of created for individuals were these age-related fact sheets that kind of help you to see where you are and the things that you need to be doing with regards to thinking about and planning for retirement. Some other ones that we have that are available that are really good are going to be the WEP, or the windfall elimination provision, and the government pension offset that helps to explain those two provisions of the law and how it works with your Social Security. And of course, we do have fact sheets available on Medicare. Next slide, please. And here on the screen is what you're going to see is just an example of what one of those age-related fact sheets would look like for you. And of course, one of the things that we're always going to do is direct you back to our webpage at socialsecurity.gov, where you can get the most current information that is available for you. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to start to talk about the good stuff. So how do you qualify for a retirement benefit? Well, the short answer is that you do need to work, and most importantly, work for an employer who has paid into Social Security for you. So for this year, for 2022, each $1,510 in earnings, that earns you 1 credit. You can earn a maximum of 4 credits per year. So as long as you've grossed at least $6,040 in 2022, then at the end of the year, you would get your 4 quarters of coverage. The minimum requirement to be eligible for a Social Security benefit is that you have to have those 40 credits, meaning that at some point over your working lifetime, you worked for an employer who was paying into Social Security for a minimum of 10 years. Then when you're age 62 or older, you would qualify for something from Social Security. Next slide, please. And the way that we calculate that benefit for you is, first of all, we all need to understand that the wages in your Social Security record is going to be adjusted for different changes and levels over time. All that's saying is that if you had wages from the 1970s, that we're going to look at and count those just a little bit differently than the wages from today. The most important thing that you need to keep in mind is that second step here, and this is where we will pull into the calculation the highest 35 years of earnings over your lifetime, not the last 5 or not the last 10, which is a big misconception that a lot of people seem to have. It is the highest 35 years of earnings over your lifetime. And I know somebody may be saying, well, what if I didn't have 35 years where I paid into Social Security? What if I only did the bare minimum and I only paid into Social Security for 10 years? Well, we'll pull in those 10 years of earnings, but what you need to understand is attached to those 10 years of earnings is 25 zeros, because the calculation will always be based upon your highest 35 years of earnings. And of course, the more 0 years that you have, the lower that projected Social Security payment would be for you. Next slide, please. Earlier, I mentioned that the earliest point that you could take your benefit is at age 62, but you could wait until your full retirement age, which is going to be based upon your year of birth. So take a moment to find your year of birth on the screen. Then you'll notice in the middle column that will let you know what your full retirement age is. And then this last column just gives an example that if your benefit at your full retirement age was $1,000, but if you elected to start that benefit early at age 62, it shows you how much that benefit would be reduced by. So say, for example, someone like myself, I fall in the category where I was born in 1960 or later. My full retirement age is 67. If I elect to take my benefit early at 62, then instead of receiving 100% of my benefit, I'm only going to receive 70% because I chose to start my benefit early. There is a 30% reduction on my benefit, and that is over the lifetime of the benefit. And then the only increases I'll get to see are going to be those COLA or cost of living increases. Next slide, please. I have another example here for you. And in this example, it makes the assumption that the individual's full retirement age is at age 66. Again, we're going to use that same $1,000. So if a person started their benefit early, say at age 62, then instead of receiving $1,000 a month, he or she is looking at receiving $750 a month. But let's just say this person, they're at their full retirement age and they're not ready to start receiving their Social Security benefit. Maybe they're trying to max it out all the way up until age 70. And that is just the point where Congress stated that we would stop the calculation. But if a person is trying to max out their benefit, they would earn what we call our delayed retirement credits. This is where you can earn up to 8% for every 12 months that you wait or delay in taking that Social Security benefit. In this example, the person whose full retirement age is 66, then instead of them receiving $1,000 a month at age 70, he or she is looking at receiving $1,320 per month. And that would be the gross amount of their benefit. Keep in mind that Social Security does not withhold taxes from your Social Security benefit unless you ask us to do so. Then at that point, we would withhold federal taxes from your Social Security benefit. Next slide, please. So in addition to the primary number holder, who else can receive benefits from your record? Well, of course, your child. As long as he or she is age 18 or 19 and still in high school, or if you have a child that is not married and we're able to determine that he or she became disabled before the age of 22, they also would be able to draw a benefit off of your record. In addition to your child, then we have your spouse. As long as he or she is age 62 or older with little or no work history, and as long as we can determine that you were married to each other for at least a year or longer, or that spouse can receive a benefit at any age as long as they're caring for a child that is under the age of 16 or disabled. Next slide, please. And so now we're going to take a look to see what is the potential spousal benefit that your spouse may be able to receive from your record. Well, the spouse may be eligible to receive up to 50% or half of whatever your benefit would be at your full retirement age. This does not include those delayed retirement credits. And they can only receive up to half of that benefit if your spouse is at his or her full retirement age. So if they come to us early, say at 62, then instead of receiving up to 50% of your benefit, they're looking at receiving approximately 30%. But in order for the spouse's benefit to be activated, we have to look to see, number one, has that primary number holder filed for and started to receive a benefit off of their own record? And then we will look to see what can the spouse receive off of their own record. Do they have a potential benefit there? And if so, if it is less than half of the spousal benefit, we can combine the two amounts to get them up to the 50% marker. And then another thing that we need to pay attention here is that a lot of people seem to have the misconception of thinking that they couldn't take the spousal benefit because it would reduce what the primary number holder would receive, and that is not true. It does not affect what the primary number holder would receive. Next slide, please. Okay, here we're going to look to see what's your spouse's full retirement age. So again, if you are married, take a look to find your spouse's year of birth. The next column is going to show what his or her full retirement age would be. And then our third column, again, we're going to use that same $1,000 for the primary number holder. And of course, it shows that if they took their benefit early at 62, how much that benefit would be reduced by. But that last column is going to show us that if the primary number holder's benefit is $1,000 a month, and the most the spouse could receive off of that record is up to half or 50%, then it shows how much they could receive and also the reduction if they take it early at age 62. Next slide, please. Now, in addition to your current spouse, a former spouse may be eligible to receive a benefit off of your record. But in order for them to receive a benefit, they're going to have to meet certain criteria. Number one, he or she had to have been married to you for at least 10 years or longer. They are currently not married and they're age 62 or older. And in this scenario, that ex-spouse, the person you're divorced from, all he or she needs to be is age 62 or older and entitled to or eligible for either a Social Security retirement benefit or a disability benefit. They do not have to be receiving it. They just need to be eligible for that benefit. And again, what we always look at Social Security, we look to see what can that divorced spouse get off of his or her own record first. If their amount is less than half of their divorced spouse, we can combine the two amounts to get them up to the 50% marker, up to that halfway point. So let's go to our next slide, please. And I have a couple of examples here for us. First up, I have Ricky and Lucy. Now, Ricky, he receives $1,200 a month. Half of that is $600. His wife, Lucy, she's ready to file. And when she files her benefit off of her own record, she's eligible to receive $1,000 a month. Well, because her $1,000 is greater than $600, is more than half, then Lucy would be able to receive a benefit off of her own record. She would not be eligible for a spousal benefit simply because what she could receive off of her own record is greater than what she would receive in a spousal benefit. And that's pretty straightforward there. So let's take a look at our second example here where we have Luke and Laura. In this example, Laura, she's filed for benefits and she's eligible to receive $1,800 a month. We know half of that is $900, but her husband, Luke, he's already filed for benefits and off of his own record, he's receiving $600 a month. Now, because Laura has filed and she has started to receive her $1,800 a month, Luke is now eligible to receive an additional $300 from Laura's record, which will get him up to that $900 mark, that half of her benefit. One of the things that we need to keep in mind is that some changes with the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015, if for whatever reason Laura were to suspend her benefit, that additional $300 that Luke is getting, that would stop. If Laura had any eligible children that were receiving off of her benefit, that amount would stop for the children as well if she suspends her benefits. The exception to this will be the divorced spouse. The divorced spouse would continue to receive their benefits, but any other beneficiaries, it would stop for them until the primary number holder resumes that benefit. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to transition here and talk about what happens when your loved one pass away. What are the potential benefits that are available? So if we can go to our next slide, please. So when we're looking at eligibility, who's eligible for a survivor's benefit? Of course, your child, as long as he or she is age 18 or 19, still in high school, or if you have that disabled child that is not married, and we at Social Security can determine that that disability started before age 22, they also would be eligible for a benefit. Then we have the widow, the widower, or the divorced widow or widower. So what are they looking at? Well, of course, they can start to receive reduced benefits as early as age 60, or they are eligible for full benefits at their full retirement age, or they may start to take or elect to receive these benefits at any age if they're caring for a child that is under the age of 16 or disabled. And then the last bullet here just talks about that divorced widows and widowers may qualify, but remember, they must meet the divorced spouse's criteria in order to qualify for a divorced widow or widower's benefit. Next slide, please. So what are we looking at here? Well, if you decide to come to start to receive this benefit, this survivor's benefit at age 60, then you're looking at receiving approximately 71.5% of the deceased worker's amount. And if you elected to do this, then when you turn age 62, one of the things we should do at Social Security is to take a look to see, can you get a higher benefit off of your own record? And if that is the case, then we would switch you to your own record at age 62. Or you could wait until age 62 to apply for the survivor's benefit, and you're looking at receiving 82.5% of the deceased worker's amount. Or you may decide to wait until your full retirement age. And if that is the case, you wait until your full retirement age, then you're looking at receiving 100% of the deceased worker's amount. And this also allows you an opportunity to leave your own benefit alone, let it continue to grow up until age 70. Then at age 70, we need to circle back around at Social Security to see, can you get a higher benefit off of your own record, and of course, then switch you to the higher record at that point in time. And the last bullet here just talks about that full benefits are available to both the widow, the widower, and the divorced widow or widower. All this is saying is if the person who passed away, if they had a current spouse, they would be eligible for a benefit. And if they were divorced from someone who meets that divorced spouse's criteria, they also would be eligible to receive a benefit off of the deceased number holder's record. Next slide, please. Okay. Has Ms. Tony or Terry talked about this yet?
No, we're going to talk about it after your presentation. So if you
Okay,
want to.
I'm just going to kind of leave the windfall elimination alone because I don't want to steal anybody else's thunder. So if we can go to next slide, please. And I think the next couple of slides are going to be web, and then GPO is going to come after that. So if we can kind of skim over all of those, and one more slide, I believe. Okay, so let's go back one. One of the questions we usually get asked at Social Security is, can I work and start to receive my benefit? The short answer is yes, you can, but you need to understand what are you up against. So if you are under your full retirement age and you start to receive your Social Security benefit, you can work and earn up to $19,560 for the year, and that equates out to $1,630 for the month. As long as you do not go over, you're going to be good to go. But if you do, then you're going to have to pay back to Social Security $1 for every 2 that you go over. Now, in the year that you would reach your full retirement age, that earnings limit, it goes up to $51,960 for the year. And that breaking that down comes out to $4,330 for the month. Again, as long as you do not go over, you're good. But if you do, then you would have to pay back to Social Security $1 for every 3 that you went over. So let's just say, for example, that I'm going to reach my full retirement age this month in August. That means that I could work and earn from January 1st through July 31st, that $51,960 for the year. But when August comes around, because that's the month where I'm going to reach my full retirement age, then at that point, there's no limit to how much I can work and earn. I can make as much as I want, and it will not affect my Social Security benefit. Another question that people will usually ask with regarding to working while receiving Social Security is they will say, okay, I started to receive my Social Security benefit. I decided to go back to work and got a part-time job where I'm paying into Social Security. So what happens to these new earnings? Well, when you reach your full retirement age, at that point, we at Social Security, we need to go back and do a recomp or recompute your Social Security benefit, looking to see if these new earnings are going to make a difference in your payment amount. Because remember, your Social Security benefit is always based upon the highest 35 years of earnings over your lifetime. And if these new earnings do make a difference, then we're going to send you a letter in the mail saying that this is what we should have paid you. This is what you were received. Then we send you the difference in the money, and then you start to receive that new payment amount from Social Security. Another thing that I want to stress when I'm talking about these limits here on the screen here for you, I am strictly talking about you going back to work, working for an employer who is paying into Social Security or paying those FICA taxes for you. These earnings limits does not include your pension, your annuity, VA compensation, anything like this. These numbers strictly talk about you going back to work, working for an employer who pays into Social Security, or if you're self-employed and you're paying those self-employment taxes. Next slide, please. Another question we usually get asked is whether or not the Social Security benefit is taxable. My response to that is that it depends. We need to figure out what is your combined income. We do this by looking at your tax return, taking your adjusted gross income. We add to that any non-taxable interest that you may have, and then we add to it half of whatever your Social Security benefit. This gives us your combined income. Now, the next thing we need to figure out is, are you filing your taxes as an individual or a member of a couple? Next slide, please. And then once we figure that out, because if you are an individual and if that combined income is less than $25,000, you do not pay taxes on the Social Security benefit. For an individual, if the combined income is between $25,000 and $34,000, you could pay taxes on up to 50% of that benefit. And if the combined income is more than $34,000, then you could pay taxes on up to 85% of that benefit. And this is one of the things that we at Social Security like to make individuals aware of. This is an IRS regulation, not Social Security. So if you have questions or concerns about this, please go to irs.gov and look for publication number 554, which is the tax guide for seniors. But also make sure that you're talking to your financial planner or your tax preparer with regards to these questions. That way there are no surprises when you do file your taxes. Next slide, please. So let's talk about how are you going to contact us. The easiest way to file when you're getting ready to apply for benefits is, of course, logging in your My Social Security account and filing that application online. The other option is to contact your local servicing Social Security office so that we can schedule an appointment for you, either a telephone appointment for you. Because like I said, we are open to the public, but we do not have walk-in appointments to take this type of claim at this point in time. So it would probably be better for you to contact the local office so we can schedule that telephone appointment for you. And how you're going to do that is contacting us at our 800 number at 800-772-1213 or your local office, and we'll be able to take that application for you. Once we take the application, if we need anything from you, we're going to let you know whether or not we need to see a marriage certificate, a divorce decree, or financial information to establish that direct deposit. Next slide, please.
Anise, could I ask a question on that, please?
Yes.
On the phone number?
Yes.
I just tried to look up the local number on the Covington Highway office, and that 800 number is the number it's listing.
Okay, so are you talking about the Decatur office or the Covington office? And the
the Decatur office.
Okay, and what I found lately is that because of the high volume of calls that the local office gets, they try to refer people to the national 800 number, and they send a message back to the local office for them to contact you to help to schedule that appointment. Or a lot of times the 800 number rep can help to schedule that appointment as well.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, payment delivery date. Okay, here's where I usually tell people, perk up, listen up to figure out when are you going to get your payment from Social Security. One of the things you need to understand is that Social Security does not pay for partial month benefits. You have to be at that particular age when you're starting to receive that benefit throughout the whole month. If your birthday falls on the first or the second day of a month, we give you credit for that month. The next thing that we need to understand is that benefits are paid the month following the month that they're due. So if we're in August right now, and if someone contacted us in August wanting their benefits to be effective and to start in August, that means you do not get your first payment until September, because we're going to pay 1 month behind. Then you need to figure out what Wednesday of the month is your check going to come. And that's going to be based upon your day of birth. So if we'll pay attention to the screen here, the 1st through the 10th is the second Wednesday of the month. The 11th through the 20th is the third Wednesday of the month, and the 21st through the 31st is the fourth Wednesday of the month. So just kind of have that in mind when you're thinking about and planning for all of your retirement options here, so that way you'll know when you're going to start to receive that benefit from Social Security. Next slide, please. And Ms. Karen, I'm going to take a moment to see, do I have any other questions before I touch on Medicare?
I think we're good for now.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and jump right into Medicare. Now, Social Security's role with Medicare is very limited. We do two things. Number one, when it is time for you to enroll in Medicare, Social Security is the federal agency that you would need to contact. And then number two, once you have enrolled in Medicare and you are age 65 or older, and you have started to receive a cash benefit from Social Security, then by law, we are required to deduct that Medicare premium from your Social Security payment, and we send that over to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So I always tell people what we do with regards to Medicare is we take the application and we take your money and send it back to CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and that is the extent of what Social Security does with Medicare. Next slide, please. Now, who can qualify for Medicare is anyone who's age 65 or older, anyone who's been on Social Security disability for 24 months or longer, individuals with ALS, and then finally those individuals who have permanent kidney failure and receives maintenance dialysis or a kidney transplant are going to be eligible for Medicare. Next slide, please. There are 3 enrollment periods that we need to be aware of with regards to Medicare. The first is called the initial enrollment period, and sometimes this is called the IEP. This is the very first opportunity for a person to enroll in Medicare. This is a 7-month window. It is 3 months before you turn age 65, your birthday month, and 3 months after you attain the age of 65. This is the very first chance you get to enroll in Medicare. The next enrollment period we need to be aware of is called the special enrollment period, or the SEP. And what the SEP says is that if you are age 65 or older, and as long as you are covered under a group healthcare plan, either your own or your spouse's, then you have a 8-month window to enroll in Medicare once you leave that employer, and we consider that to be timely enrollment in Medicare. Then the last enrollment period is going to be the GEP. And this is every year from January 1st through March 31st that a person can enroll in Medicare. And this is going to be for those individuals who missed the initial enrollment period, they missed their first opportunity, and they do not qualify for the special enrollment period. And as of right now, when you enroll in the GEP, then your coverage does not start until July of that same year. But here's the kicker here: when you enroll in the GEP, that means that we have to look to see or to determine what was the very first opportunity that you could have enrolled in Medicare. And this is where we determine as to whether or not that 10% penalty will be assessed to you when you enroll under the general enrollment period. Next slide, please. With Medicare, okay, and this is going to be for the initial enrollment period. So if you are enrolling in the IEP, when does your coverage start? If you enroll 3 months before you reach age 65, your coverage starts in your birthday month or when you attain the age of 65. If you waited until the month that you turn 65 to enroll in Medicare, your coverage starts the next month. If you wait 1 month after you reach age 65, the coverage starts 2 months down the road. And if you wait 2 or 3 months after you attain age 65, your coverage starts 3 months down the road. And keep in mind that this is just for right now. Come first of the year, some of these Medicare rules will be changing, and we'll be able to provide more information on that when that happens. Next slide, please. With Medicare, there's a couple of different parts that you need to be aware of. You can always elect original Medicare, and sometimes it's called traditional Medicare. This is what will consist of Medicare Part A. This is going to be where it covers your hospital stays. For most people, you're going to find that you would not pay a premium for Part A. If you have less than that 40 quarters of coverage, then you could be subject to paying a monthly premium for Medicare Part A. And I believe it's if you have less than 30 quarters of coverage, the max that you would pay for Part A is $4.99, and that is per month. Part B, everybody has to pay for that. That is going to be your medical insurance. This is going to help to cover the cost when you go see your different doctors. You can also add to that Part D, the prescription drug plan. I believe the average cost of that is roughly somewhere around about $34 a month. And that is in addition to that Part B premium. And the base premium for Part B for this year is $170.10. Keep in mind that if you are a higher wage earner, in addition to that base premium, you could have to pay an additional surcharge. The other option that people may elect is to decide to go with an Advantage plan, or sometimes you'll hear it called Medicare Part C. This is going to be where these private companies are following the rules and regulations for the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and they like to bundle together Part A, Part B, Part D, and then sometimes they'll throw in something extra like a gym membership or maybe a hearing or dental plan, all for a predetermined cost. What I'm going to tell you here is that that cost is going to vary from provider to provider, and this is where you would have to do your due diligence to determine what will be the right plan for you. And also, you're going to have to figure out whether when you're retiring, from your school system, whether that school system requires you to enroll in Medicare, and just make sure that you do enroll timely to save yourself any additional expense. The place where you want to start your search in terms of figuring out where to even go with all of this Medicare is to go to Medicare.gov. That's going to be your good starting point. Also, you're going to know when you get close to Medicare age. I call it the Medicare tsunami. This is where all of these different companies are going to be overwhelming you with text messages, voicemail messages, emails, and then, of course, regular old snail mail trying to vie for your business. And it's going to be up to you to figure out what your healthcare needs are so that you can determine what is the best fit for you when you're trying to figure out your coverage option. Next slide, please.
And Anise, while I'm switching slides, I will say that the state health benefit plan will be sending you information as you approach age 65. Please pay attention to what they offer, because if you choose to go off the state health benefit plan, which does provide a Medicare Advantage plan, you can never get back on. Never, ever, no exceptions. So don't be lured off the state health benefit plan unless you are being purposeful about that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Karen. And I do have a couple of different little scenarios that I want to walk you through before I wrap up my portion of the presentation. The first here talks about that if a person has elected to start receiving that cash benefit from Social Security before age 65, do you need to come running into Social Security to sign up for Medicare? The answer is no, meaning that when you get 3 months before you reach age 65, we at Social Security, we will automatically enroll you in Medicare. You'll get a letter in the mail from us, and you'll get your red, white, and blue card or that Medicare card in the mail. And the next thing that you would notice is that we would start to deduct those premiums out of your Social Security benefit. So you don't have to do anything if you've elected to start to receive that cash benefit before the age of 65. We're going to take care of all of that for you. So that's pretty easy here. But let's look at our next scenario here. Our next slide here talks about that if a person is still working at age 65, and as long as you're covered under a group healthcare plan, either your own or your spouse's, I usually tell people, talk to HR to find out, do they require you to enroll in Medicare at age 65? If they do not, consider just enrolling in Medicare Part A only, because remember, as long as you have that minimum requirement of that 40 quarters of coverage, A is not going to cost you anything. So take Part A while you're still working and tell us at that point, I don't want Part B right now because I'm still working and I have health insurance through my employer. That way, when you do leave employment, you have an 8-month window to contact Social Security to say, hey, I'm now ready to enroll in Medicare Part B, and we consider that to be timely enrollment for you. I do want everyone to pay attention to that note in the middle of the screen, because if a high deductible health savings account is part of your health benefits plan, you must stop your contributions to that account 6 months before you can enroll in Medicare Part A. This is an IRS regulation, not Social Security, because there could be tax liability that you might incur if you do not do that timely. So you have to stop your contributions to that health savings account 6 months in advance. You can use whatever there, you just can't put anything else into it. Next slide, please. Another thing that we need to look at, we usually tell people that when you're ready to enroll in Medicare, contact us anywhere from 2 to 3 months before you're ready to retire. You want to come to our webpage at socialsecurity.gov, because we're going to need you to download 2 forms for us. The first form is going to be that L564. What this is a form for someone in HR to complete for you so that we can verify that you always had health coverage through that employer. It will tell us the start date of that coverage and the end date of that coverage for you. And then, of course, the other form that you need to complete is the CMS Form 40B. That is the actual application where you're going to check, yes, I want Part A, or yes, I want Part B to enroll in Medicare. The thing that I want to stress to everybody that is very important, that L564 and the 40B, those 2 forms are married. They must come back to Social Security together. If you send one without the other, we cannot do anything with that form until the other form comes. And then when we receive both forms, at that point is going to be considered the effective date from when we can process those forms for you. So it's very important that both of them come back to us together. I usually tell people they're like peas and carrots, peanut butter and jelly. They got to stick together and come back to Social Security. And I can't stress enough that failure to file for Part B timely could result in a 10% penalty for every 12 months that you wait or delay in enrolling in Part B. Next slide, please. Now, the next scenario I want to talk about just shows that if a person is not working at age 65, and if they are waiting because they're not ready to receive that cash benefit from us, but they want to enroll in Medicare, they can file what we call is a Medicare only application with us. When they file that Medicare only application, then the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they will send you a quarterly bill where you would have to pay those Medicare premiums 3 months in advance. Or if you find that you can't do that, one of the things I'm going to suggest to you is to create a My Medicare account. This way you can log into your My Medicare account and you can pay your premiums directly to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The other option here is that they have an option called Medicare Easy Pay, where you give them information from your checking or savings account, and then they will debit that account for you. Next slide, please. Okay, let's see. I think I kind of skipped ahead if you're not working. Okay, next slide. And here is just a reminder of what a snippet of what the webpage will look like when you come to socialsecurity.gov to be able to download those two forms, that L564 and the 40B. Just please download those, get the L564 to HR so that they can complete that one timely for you, and just make sure that the L564 and the 40B, they must come back to Social Security together. Next slide, please. Here on the screen earlier, I mentioned that if you are a higher wage earner, in addition to the base premium for Medicare, you could have to pay an additional surcharge, and that is going to be based upon your modified adjusted gross income. And at Social Security, in order for us to determine what that is, we look at your income from 2 years in the past. So right now we're in 2022. So in order for us to determine this, we're going to look at your income from 2020. As we go into 2023, we would look at the income from 2021. We're always looking back at the income 2 years in the past. And if you are a member of a couple, those premiums that you see or the additional surcharge, that is the amount that each member of the couple would be required to pay for Part B and for Part D if you've enrolled in either one or both of those. Next slide, please. Okay, here's just an example of the Medicare.gov webpage. This is where you're going to have that opportunity to go in, create that My Medicare account for yourself. And it's going to provide a lot of really good information or basic information, such as, you know, what Medicare covers for you. This is going to be your good starting point, because you have to remember that with all of these companies who are trying to sell you something, they're only going to give you information regarding to them. To get the whole picture, you need to start at Medicare.gov to figure out what is going to be best for you and get the basics about Medicare. Next slide, please. Here's just some more information with links showing you that if you had that My Medicare account, it's going to show you, you know, what Medicare has paid, what's pending, and of course, whether or not you're current on your premiums. And of course, they're going to have an option there that if you need to contact someone with customer service, how to reach out to them and get your questions answered with regards to what's covered and not covered. Because remember, we at Social Security, with regards to Medicare, we're only going to be able to take that application. And then if you're age 65 and older and enrolled in Medicare, then we're going to deduct those premiums from your Social Security benefit. Next slide, please. Here on the screen, what you're going to see is an example of what your Medicare card is going to look like. And of course, the familiar red, white, and blue card. And of course, it will have a series of letters and numbers on the card. And then it will show the effective date of your Part B and A coverage, or your Part A and B coverage, I should say. When does it start? And I believe our next slide is going to wrap it up for me. And I want to just pause to see, does anyone have any additional questions for me? I do apologize for my technical difficulties, but I'm hoping that we were able to salvage the presentation and get through this. And Ms. Karen, please feel free to share that PowerPoint with the group.
I will. You did have one question in the chat, Anise, that says, if I worked in another state that takes out Social Security, am I still eligible to receive that state's benefit if I live in Georgia?
And I'm assuming you're talking about the teacher's retirement benefit. And I believe this is going to be talked about with regards to the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset, because it's all going to come down to as to whether or not that pension that you're going to receive from that employer, as to whether or not they paid into Social Security or not for you, will determine that. And I don't want to steal her thunder.
That sounds great. Again, when I send out a recap of this meeting in the next week or so, including a link to the video, you'll receive contact information for everybody. And you also do know how to contact or get in touch with your local Social Security office. So for individual questions, that's probably going to be your best source of information. So other questions or concerns before we move on? And Anise, thank you for your persistence today. I'm appreciative of that. Where there's a will, there's a way, and sometimes technology is our friend or not. So
Yes, ma'am. And I appreciate it. And thank you all. And please share my contact information. And if someone has a question, I may not be able to answer it, but I'll get you to the right person.
great. Mike, you are sharing, so I guess we'll do GPO web after that. It says you have started sharing, and I don't see
Well,
it. Go ahead.
well, I thought I was on. If I'm not.
No,
I'll
that's
stop.
okay. I think we can do that. Is that okay, Judy and Vivian, if Mike goes first?
Well,
Yes.
no,
So,
All right,
so
well,
that
now-
would mean that we
I already-
wouldn't start for another hour.
Yeah, do you need to go now? Should we do that?
go ahead. That's
Okay.
fine.
We will. Here we go. We're going to, as I mentioned, Anise talks about the good stuff, about how you get Social Security benefits. And our
I'm
members
not seeing.
of the GAE Retirement Committee are going to talk about how we take that away. And so, Vivian, are you going to talk through the PowerPoint? You want me to talk through it? Judy's going to do reality check thereafter.
I'll talk through it.
Okay.
Okay, how is Social Security benefits earned? You have work credits that you earn from your job. 40 credits are needed for retirement and Medicare benefits. $1,510 is equal to 1 credit. And the most credits that you can earn is 4 credits, which is a little bit over $6,000 per year. Okay, next. GPO, WEB, and Social Security benefits. GPO is government pension offset, and WEP is windfall elimination provision. Next. Okay, GPO is government pension offset, and that is the spouse. WEP is the windfall elimination provision, and that is the self, the person. Okay, next. Okay, Social Security benefits is a federal program, and the GPO and the WEP, the WEP, are Social Security penalties. Next. There are 15 states that do not pay into Social Security, or they allow people to, allow companies to opt out of paying into Social Security. And Georgia is one of them. We do not, some school districts do not pay into Social Security, and some school districts do pay into Social Security. So we are often affected by GPO and WEP WEP. Okay, public sector jobs, a lot of times police, firefighters, paramedics, and teachers and other public service jobs are affected. Also, postal workers. Next. 1.9 million are affected nationally with the WEP. So not 1.9 million are affected by WEP, and 56,000 are affected by WEP in Georgia. Next. 700,000 are affected by GPO nationally, and 20,000 people are affected by GPO in Georgia, and the numbers are growing. Next. Windfall elimination provision was implemented in 1983. Next. Okay, on the WEP, on your W-2 form, there are spaces for, you will see Social Security wages and Social Security tax withheld. So you'll see that on your W-2 form. And then it says Medicare wages and tips and Medicare tax withheld. If you don't see any numbers there, then you're not paying into Social Security. Next. WEP, WEP, 1/2 of people are affected by WEP. Next.
No, I think what this slide is saying, I'm sorry, is that the WEP can affect what you would receive in Social Security benefits up to having 1/2 of your Social Security benefits cut.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maximizing Social Security, the government pension offset, the GPO offset, was implemented in 1977. Next. 2/3.
And this is where the GPO can affect what you receive in spousal benefits by cutting the spousal benefits up to 2/3.
Great. Next. GPO reduction formula. So this is the formula that Social Security uses for the GPO. Ann makes $3,000. The reduction is 2/3. 2,000 reduction to Social Security survivors or spouses benefits. GPO reduction applied, $2,200, and Social Security survivor. In other words, and Social Security survivor benefit is $2,200 with the GPO reduction, which would be minus $2,000, and Social Security survivor benefit after GPO reduction would only be $200 per month. Next.
So let me start this video. It's a 2 or 3 minute video, and it talks about TRS, but they're referring in this video to the Texas retirement system, but the information is applicable to those of us in Georgia who retired or will retire from systems that do not pay into Social Security. So let's take a look at this video.
Meet Kim. Kim is an assistant principal at a middle school. She's been a TRS member for 12 years. Before becoming an educator, Kim worked as a public librarian for 11 years. While working for the city, Kim paid into the Social Security system. Since she began working for her school district, Kim has not paid into Social Security. Like most Texas school districts, her district does not participate in Social Security. That means Kim is only eligible for Social Security benefits based on her previous employment with the city and through her spouse, who has paid into Social Security for his entire career. Kim is currently reading up on 2 Social Security provisions that could reduce or even eliminate her Social Security benefits. The Windfall Elimination Provision, also known as WEP or WEP, and the Government Pension Offset, or GPO. Because Kim will receive a TRS pension for employment in which she did not pay Social Security taxes, the Social Security benefits she earned from her previous employment could be reduced by the WEP, but not totally eliminated. The amount of the reduction depends on the amount of her earnings and the number of years she paid Social Security taxes. The GPO, however, could offset or even eliminate Kim's spousal benefits if she retires from her current employer. The GPO will reduce her spousal Social Security benefits by 2/3 of her TRS pension. If 2/3 of Kim's TRS pension exceeds the amount of her spousal benefits from Social Security, she will not receive a spouse or widow's Social Security benefit. If you or your spouse has paid into the Social Security system, contact a Social Security representative to determine if the WEP or GPO apply to you. Ask if there are any exceptions to the GPO that could eliminate the offset to your spousal benefits. Be prepared to balance out the potential effects of these provisions with personal savings when you retire.
So these are some additional links for more information. And this is an initiative that NEA and NEA, the National Education Association, and NEA Retired are working on. And the efforts to repeal GPO WEP, and I'm hoping that Vivian, you'll chime back in here.
Okay, yes. There's a HR 82, a Social Security Fairness Act of 2021, where legislators are trying to repeal GPO WEP. And so far we have 295 legislators to co-sign on the bill. We only needed 290 legislators to co-sign on the bill so the bill could be heard.
And what this bill would do is totally eliminate these two pieces of federal legislation. And you can see here, Vivian, you muted, who has signed on. Of the Georgia delegation of our 14 representatives, we have 8 signatures. And then I found out last week that of our 2 senators, Raphael Warnock has signed on in support of the Senate version to repeal the GPO WEP.
Okay, the National WEP GPO Repeal Task Force Day of Action was held in Washington, D.C. on May 18th. Me and Patrick Crabtree attended the D.C. rally, which was the repeal of the WEP GPO rally. And we met with legislators and we talked with them and tried to encourage them to repeal GPO WEP.
NEIA also had a day of action on May 24th, again, to work on the repeal of GPO WEP. And in the No magazine, we've had the GAE No magazine, which you can find online at the GAE website. There's been 2 different issues, including the current one, that gives information about both of these federal pieces of legislation. Vivian, do you want to talk about the piece of new business item that was proposed at the NEA Representative Assembly? You're muted, my
Okay.
friend.
Karen, you were there to hear it and be a part of it, I believe.
Yes, and you can see on the screen, Georgia proposed this piece of legislation again because we think that people should not be penalized who have paid into Social Security, but yet have retired from a system or a profession that doesn't pay into Social Security. So this piece of this new business item at the Chicago NEA Representative Assembly was passed. So GAE President Lisa Morgan will be naming the people to serve from our state on this lobbying cadre. So Vivian, do you have anything else to add? And I know Judy does, as far as how.
No, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing.
Okay. Hello, I am Judy Polachek, and I am a retired ESP. So those of you that are familiar with pay scales for ESPs know that we are pretty far down on the pay scale. And I'm going to talk, you've heard about the good part of Social Security, and I'm here to talk about the bad and the ugly parts of it. Particularly GPO, the government pension offset. My husband died 3 years ago. And when I went to the Social Security office to register for benefits as a spouse, I learned that I would only be receiving less than 1/3 of what I would ordinarily be eligible for as a spouse. And every year I have to report the COLA that TRS gives us. And then Social Security in turn deducts basically that small amount from my Social Security. So as I was speaking to Karen a couple of days ago, and as she was saying, so you will never, ever earn any more money than what you're getting now. And that's true. TRS could give us a 20% COLA. I would not see a cent of it. So that is the bad part, the really bad part, because it affects really the people that need the money the most. It affects widows who had who are earning a lower pay than, say, a certified teacher. A certified teacher could possibly retire with a living pension, but an ESP could not. And it's the law. And unfortunately, I worked in DeKalb County, and DeKalb County opted out of Social Security before the GPO and the WEP laws were passed. So people really didn't understand what they were doing when they voted to opt out. I was not an employee of the county at that point. And I would imagine if any of you work in a school district that is not part of Social Security, you were not part of that decision to opt out. So that is the bad part now I'm going to give you a heads up as to the ugly part. And that is that some of us this week have received letters from Social Security saying that they've decided they have overpaid us the last few years, even though it was their decision how much we would receive based on our pension. And they're telling us that we have to pay back thousands of dollars immediately. And they're also, in my case and other people that I know, deducting hundreds of dollars from our Social Security benefit. So this is the ugly part of Social Security.
How many people have heard of GPO WEP before today? Can you give me a thumbs up at all? Have you heard of it? If you are, and I'm not seeing any thumbs happening. So part of what GAE and GAE, oh, yep, thank you. What GAE and GAE retired are trying to do is to educate folks, because even if it doesn't impact you directly, it probably impacts somebody you know in the teaching profession. You would be doing me a great service if in the chat you could put the name of your school system and a yes or no, whether or not your school system does pay into Social Security. We're compiling a master list from across the state of all the school districts, so we know who, which systems are and are not paying into Social Security. Thank you so much for starting that chat roll. I appreciate that. Again, it's not fair. It impacts my Social Security also, that after I have my 40 quarters in, once I go through and pay my Medicare, I too will be getting about $200, $100 to $200 in Social Security. And despite the fact that I've paid into Social Security throughout my lifetime, it's because I'm not retiring from a Social Security system, and the politicians who enacted this legislation think that it's double dipping, which it's not. It really, if I retired from a system who did pay into Social Security, I'd get my Social Security, I'd get my TRS. But Judy, I think Vivian, do you get Social Security benefits? We are not that fortunate. So anything?
Well, one other thing.
Yes.
This is not a Democratic or a Republican issue. This affects everybody. You look at the state of Texas, the entire state of Texas does not pay into Social Security for educators. And we certainly know that Texas is not a blue state. And it's something that everybody really should get behind. It's absolutely not fair. My husband worked for almost 60 years paying into Social Security. It's not as though the money wasn't paid in. And we definitely need your support. People across the country just are not aware of it. I would imagine nobody realized that there was a rally in Washington, D.C. in May. If the news happened to carry it, it wasn't in a big way. So we need to get the word out. We really, it's very important. It means that people could actually get a living amount on their pension and Social Security benefits.
Thank you so much, Judy and Vivian, for being the harbingers of bad news in this. And please pay attention to GAE publications and updates as we work towards repealing these pieces of legislation that affect so many public sector workers, not only in Georgia, but across the country. So I appreciate that. And now we have a little bit of good news here in terms of Mike Zorum from TRS sharing about TRS and your retirement. So Mike, let me start, I hope, from this slide. And Mike too shared with me that he was having technology difficulties with a new computer today. So nobody buy a new computer today. It just seems like the technology forces are against us. So here we go, I hope, Mike.
Well, I see the multi-slide screen there. Okay. Yeah, y'all get a new a boat when you retire, so you can look forward to that. You can go to the next slide. You can advance it. Oh, you advanced it and then it went backwards again.
Okay, I'm looking at the one that says 7 retirement plan options.
Oh, you're way ahead.
Okay,
It
So
should be
we
you
got-
deserve a great benefit. What
Okay.
could be happening is that what I'm seeing is way slower than where you are.
well.
All
I-
right,
I
so
can
I'm
do-
seeing it
I can
should
do-
be the benefits of membership.
That's where I'm at, benefits of membership. And when you tell me next slide, maybe I will share what I'm showing. Does that help?
Yeah, because right now I'm still seeing the 7 plans of retirement. Okay, but the benefits of membership, I mean, you deserve a great benefit. You've been, you know, with the struggles of teaching for through this pandemic, a lot of people with high expectations and little resources. But fortunately, as long as you have a full career under TRS, you do get that proverbial pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I've talked to a lot of certified financial planners, licensed financial advisors. They all wish they had personally had the TRS plan. It's important to remember that what you get from TRS is not tied to the stock market. The stock market can go up and down, but it doesn't matter in terms of your TRS benefit, because we look at a formula that looks at your service, like the service, and your salary. That's it. Behind the scenes, we fund a lot of your benefit through the stock market, but you don't have to worry about what it does. It is also guaranteed for life. You can't outlive your benefit. We've got over 9,000 retirees who are over the age of 85. Also, if you pick a benefit that leaves money to survivors, say a spouse or children, for example, their benefit is also guaranteed for their life if they're your survivor. So Karen, you can go to the next slide.
And I'm looking at TRS retirement plans, 7 retirement plan options.
Okay, great. That's what I'm seeing. You have a lot of different directions you can go, like these signs sort of suggest. We're going to look at each of those options in a few minutes. There's cost of living adjustments that we'll talk about. You have to decide whether or not you want what's called a partial lump sum option, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the bottom line is, according to the financial experts, and here painting with a broad brushstroke, In order to maintain your standard of living in retirement, you need to replace 80%, 80% of your pre-retirement income to maintain that standard of living. So when you add any Social Security that you might be getting, plus TRS, plus your 403B or 457 or whatever supplemental benefit you're using, hopefully that you have through your school system, all those three things added together would cross that 80% threshold. And that's just a starting point, but it does give you an idea of what you're likely going to need in retirement. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Here is that formula. We take your years of creditable service, and that's your day-to-day membership, your unused sick leave, and your service purchases. And we'll talk about each of those later. And you can have partial years. So you put them all in one bucket. All that time is multiplied by 2%. Then we look at your whole career and we say, where are the highest consecutive 24 months of pay? And they don't have to be at the end. They can be anywhere in your career. And we average that together and put it into the formula. And that generates the most you can get from TRS, which we call your maximum plan. 65 to 70% of our retirees take the maximum plan. The others take plans that leave money after you pass away. And we'll look at that in more detail. All the other plans that aren't the maximum are going to be an actuarial reduction from whatever your maximum benefit is. So we look at your age and the age or ages of your beneficiaries to determine actuarially how much your reduction is going to be. Well, once you retire, a lot of nice things happen. Like you don't have to get up early to go to work. But another one is that certain deductions you're used to seeing on your active check don't come out of your retirement check. One big one is TRS doesn't come out of your TRS retirement check. And that's 6% right off the top that you get back. Plus there's no payroll taxes. So there's no Social Security coming out if it was. There's no Medicare old age survivor. That can be anywhere from, if you just have Medicare, that's not coming out, that's about 1.5% you get back. If you have Social Security coming out now, you're going to see a nice 7.5% increase because that deduction no longer comes out of your TRS check. There's no 403B deduction. That stops. And then once you're age 62 and living in Georgia and you're retired, there's an exemption of $35,000 on state tax. So you save 5% there once you're age 62 living here in Georgia. And then once you're 65, that exemption jumps up to $65,000. So the vast majority of our retirees age 65 and older don't pay any state tax. But there is one deduction that I think you'd all want to come out, and that's your state health benefit plan. And that's actually by default continued unless you don't want health coverage from us in retirement. So used to be you had to fill out a form, but they stopped that. Now it just defaults. And the price stays the same until you're 65 and you go on to a Medicare Advantage program. Then your rate with us drops, but then you have to pick up Medicare, and that makes your total cost higher, but you have really a higher coverage level. And all our retirees really like it. During retirement, you don't have a open enrollment for health insurance. You can't simply pick it up because you want to. In fact, if you're a retiree and you cancel your coverage, you can't get back in. And by the way, that's happened to about 800 retirees who got so swept up by Joe Namath and Jimmy Dynamite Walker on those Medicare.gov commercials or Medicare.com, whatever it was, they left our plan and now they can't get back in. And, you know, I guess behind the scenes, we're seeing what we can do, but don't let that be you. You know, if you get out, you can't get back in. But you do have a retiree option change period where you can change options. For example, once a year, you could go from Anthem to United Healthcare, for example. All right, next slide. Once you have 30 years of service, you can retire regardless of your age. Or if you're 60 with 10 or more years of service, maybe you got started in your teaching career later on. Once you're 60 and have 10 or more, you could also retire. But remember, based on the formula, the more years you have, the higher your benefit's going to be. And then anyone who becomes disabled and can't do his or her job can apply for disability benefits, and you could get a benefit based on your length of service, provided it's at least 10 years, and there's no penalty for leaving before any age. Okay, Karen, next slide. If you do want to leave early, you can in some scenarios, but as you might expect, there is a penalty. And this would be for people who have at least 25 years, but they're not yet 60. You know, if you're 60 and you have 10 or more, you could take a normal retirement. Basically, for every year you're under age 60 or every year you're under 30, there's a 7% penalty. So we apply the penalty that would generate the largest benefit for you. But you can see if you had, let's say you were 50 years old with 25 years of service, you could qualify for an early retirement, but you'd have 5 years less than the required, and 5 times 7 is a 35% reduction. So you only get about 2/3 of your normal benefit. So it is a substantial reduction, but it's out there if it is something that makes sense for you and your family. Okay, Karen, next slide. Here are the plans you have to choose from, and we'll go through each of them one at a time. But the first step in trying to pick the one you want, I think, is to divide them into 2 groups. Plan A maximum and option 1. Those 2 plans maximize the amount you're going to get, but they don't leave any monthly benefits to survivors. On the other hand, the other options 2 through 4 leave varying amounts of money to 1 or more beneficiaries that survive you. So if you know that no one's dependent upon you for income, you might want to look at the maximum plan because there's no reduction in what your benefit is. Okay, Karen, next slide. Before we look at each option individually, I think conceptually it's important to understand this notion of your TRS account having 2 buckets of money in it. One bucket I'll call your bucket that had all your contributions and interest in it, all the money that came out of your paycheck every month, plus the interest we paid you while that money was sitting in your bucket. All right. We never keep any of the money that went into your bucket. It always goes back to you at some point, either through your monthly benefit or to a beneficiary in a lump sum or in a monthly benefit. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about beneficiaries too. And then the other bucket I'll call the TRS bucket. That's got all the employer contributions and return on investment. Remember I said we put the money into the stock and bond market that we get from you. That return on investment, along with employer contributions, goes into the TRS bucket, which is used to pay your benefit once your bucket of money runs out. And your bucket of money, even though you might have been putting money in for 30 plus years, only lasts about 2 to 3 years. of your money. And then for the rest of your life and any survivors that are covered, the money's going to come out from the TRS bucket, and that never runs out. Okay, Karen, next slide. So with Plan A, remember, you're getting the most money you can. The money in your bucket lasts 2 to 3 years, and then we pay from the TRS bucket. If you pass away before the money in your bucket is used up, we will pay your designated beneficiary in a lump sum what's ever left in your bucket. All right. Plan B option 1 is a little bit different because your very first benefit checks come out of both buckets, your bucket and the TRS bucket. So that extends the life of your bucket of money. Instead of the 2 to 3 years, it lasts about 10 to 14. So the benefit to you is that if you were to pass away before the 10 to 14 years is up, there'd still be money left in your bucket to give to a beneficiary in a lump sum. But remember, with either of these two, there's no monthly benefit going to a survivor. And that's why your monthly benefit is higher. To get Plan B option 1, you take a reduction from your maximum benefit. That's probably around 1% or so. But it's different for everyone, and you don't know what your reductions will be until you actually see an estimate. Okay, Karen. Conceptually, before we look at options 2 through 4, sometimes it helps to think of all these options as a ride on a teeter-totter or seesaw. I'm from the Midwest. I'm not sure what y'all call them here in the South, but I know them as a teeter-totter. And basically, the more money you take for yourself, like the option 2, for example, the more you take for yourself, the less becomes available for your beneficiaries. But the more you decide that you want to leave to beneficiaries, the less your monthly benefit is. But all these plans, regardless of the one you take, have what's called actuarial equivalence, which means that TRS doesn't matter which one you take because the expected payout over your lifetime and any beneficiaries is the same, regardless of what you pick. So, you know, you pick the plan that makes most sense for you and your family. But that's the dynamic of how these things work. You know, it's kind of like squeezing a balloon. You know, you push on one end and it scrunches up, becomes less, but then, you know, there's more air or money going in the other direction. Okay, Karen, you can switch it. Option 2 leaves the most you can to a beneficiary. In fact, whatever you're getting at the time you pass away is the same monthly benefit that's going to go to a survivor. And you can have multiples. So for example, let's say at retirement, you took option 2, and when you pass away, you're getting $4,000 a month from us. And you took 2 beneficiaries, each getting 50% of your benefit. So they'd each get $2,000 a month, plus COLAs during their lifetime. That's very rich for the beneficiary. So your monthly benefit's going to go down. And I would say normally what I see is about a 10 to 25% reduction from your maximum benefit. Option 3 leaves your beneficiary 1/2 of what you were getting, but it doesn't cost you as much. So in our example, if you were getting $4,000 a month when you die, and you took option 3, your beneficiary would get 1/2 that, or $2,000, or the $2,000 would be divided between or among the beneficiaries you designated. But since they're getting less, it costs you less on your monthly TRS check. The reduction is typically, I'd say 5 to 15% less, you know, on average than your maximum benefit. Okay, Karen, you can switch it. Now, option 2 and 3 have a pop-up variation. And under the pop-ups, you can only designate one primary beneficiary. Under all the other plans, you can have as many as you want. But if you want a pop-up, you can only have one. And the idea is that if that one primary beneficiary dies before you, then your benefit as the retiree pops up to the maximum plan amount. The normal pop-up I see is maybe $300 or $400 extra a month, which might be helpful if you were dependent upon that person's income for during your retirement. You could get some or all of it back through the pop-up. It doesn't cost a lot to add the pop-up to option 2 or 3. It works the same way, the pop-up for the respective option. I'd say maybe I see, maybe $60 to $100 less per month if you want to add the pop-up. But if it's something that you're interested in, you think it might make sense for you, you can certainly, on your estimate, see what it would cost you. Okay, Karen, next one. Then lastly, but not least, is option 4, where you can specify a fixed dollar amount or a percentage to go to one or more beneficiaries. So you might want to leave 33% to a beneficiary, or 75%, or you might want to leave $1,000 a month. If you want to do it that way, you can under option 4. So this is how sophisticated planners might go about it. They look at what they kind of balance, maximize what they can get from TRS while leaving just enough for a survivor with their other income to subsist just fine. So it's a way to fine tailor what you're going to get and what the beneficiary is going to get. Okay, Karen, you can switch it. Okay, now I'm going to do a quiz. Normally when we're in person, it's a little more interactive, but I think I'll pose the questions and then I'll give you 1 second to think, and then I'll give you the answer. So here we got a scenario with Mary, and she has no dependents and no one depends on your income, on her income. So if you were Mary, what option might you reasonably select? Well, no one's going to have a financial hardship if Mary passes away. So why shouldn't Mary, take advantage of the maximum plan? Because no one's going to need a survivor benefit. So here, I think most times Mary would take the maximum plan. All right, in scenario 2, we have Sue, who does have a spouse, but the spouse has no savings, won't be getting a pension, won't be getting Social Security. And despite all his efforts, he has yet to win the lotto. All right. And we do have to assume, for the sake of argument, that Sue loves her spouse and wants to take care of him. And in that scenario, Sue might most reasonably would select the option that provides the most protection for her spouse. And that would be option 2, because that spouse isn't going to be getting a pension, doesn't have savings, So option 2 provides the best protection for Sue's spouse. And then in scenario 3, we've got Tom, who's married. The spouse will be getting a pension and Social Security. But when they run the numbers, Tom's spouse is still $500 a month short of meeting her day-to-day subsistence needs. What option should Tom reasonably choose? And in this scenario, it's set up where Tom would take option 4, and he would designate a fixed dollar amount of the $500. That way, they're maximizing what they can get from TRS, while also providing Tom's spouse with that needed boost of $500 a month if Tom dies first. Then the spouse will have enough money with all the other inflow of cash to make ends meet. Now, clearly these are simplified life scenarios, but it does give you an idea of a thought process you might want to use when you're trying to decide which is the best option for you. Okay, you can go to the next slide, Karen. Then once you've picked your option, you have to decide yes or no if you want one of these partial lump sum option plans, which we call PLOP for short. And it's a lump sum distribution of cash. You get a separate check or a separate direct deposit of anywhere from 1 to 36 months of your benefit payment under the maximum plan. And you can do anything you want with this money, pay off debt, buy something, but you can save it, you could invest it, anything you want. But once you do get a PLOP, there is a reduction in your monthly benefit for the rest of your life. And that ranges typically anywhere from $7 to $10 less per month per $1,000 of PLOP that you take. And you'll see that on your estimates. About 10% of our retirees take a PLOP distribution, and on average, the gross amount is around $65,000. Be careful, there are some investment people out there that know that these TRS PLOPs are available. And, sometimes if you're interacting with them, they may be suggesting investments to you that maximize their commissions, but aren't necessarily the best route for you to take. So be real careful with these things. And at TRS, we feel they're very expensive based on the reduction that happens to your TRS benefit. But it is an option available to you, and it might make sense for you in some scenarios. And it may be a good thing to talk to your licensed financial advisor about. Quickly, a PLOP, you can take it all directly and pay normal taxes on it. Or you could roll some or all of it into another qualified retirement plan, like a traditional IRA at your local bank. Or I think most of if you're in a 403B now with your school system, most of them I think would be happy to take a rollover from TRS, and then you could take that money out later and defer taxes on it until you start receiving a distribution. Okay, Karen, you can advance. One of the most marvelous things about your TRS plan, and it's something that's disappearing from even other public sector plans. For example, even though I work for TRS, I'm covered under the ERS retirement plan because I'm a state employee. And here in Georgia, ERS employees aren't getting COLAs anymore. They changed the policy, and I think we just retirees under ERS just recently got a COLA under Governor Kemp, but it had been many, many years. So you're fortunate with TRS that you have these COLAs, and every year, twice a year, you get a 1.5% increase, and it compounds on itself. So you're really getting a tad bit more than 3% a year. Your very first COLA is cycled in anywhere from 7 to 12 months after you retire, depending on your retirement date. If you're the typical classroom teacher, you can see at the bullet points at the bottom, your last day in the classroom is May. So your effective retirement date is always the first of the month following your last day of actually being on the job. So you'd be a June 1 retirement, and therefore you get your first COLA 7 months later in January. That'd be the least amount of time you'd have to wait for your first COLA. Now, every 6 months getting 1.5% may not seem a lot from one COLA to the next, but when you've been retired 12, 13 years, you're making 50% more than when you started, and it doubles after about 24 years. And I've bumped into a lot of retirees on the road who come to me with a big smile on their face because, you know, they're now making more in retirement because of COLAs than they did while they were actively teaching. So this is a marvelous part of your TRS benefit. Okay, Karen, you can advance. We're about to look at a benefit estimate, and in this example, our person retired June 1 of 2013. His average high salary, you know, the high 24 months average together was about $5,500, and he worked 34.444 years. So we stuff that information into the formula. Take the 34.4 years times 2%, he's going to get 68.888% of that high average salary of $55.36. And that comes out to the $38.14.21 under the maximum plan. So let's look at the next slide. And this is the top half of an estimate. Yours will have the same information in it in the same kind of layout. It won't have the graphics, and obviously the names and the numbers will be different, but the template is the same. On the top half, you have all the assumptions and inputs. You're going to have to give us the retirement date. The computer will automatically find your high 24 months of salary and give you the average high salary. If you want to assume annual increases in your salary from the time the estimate's printed up to the time you retire, you can input any amount. If you want to be conservative, you can leave it at 0. It'll show you your minimum and maximum plot distributions that you could take. It'll show you how much time you have under TRS when this is printed, how much more you're anticipated to have until your retirement date. One thing we do not have, which most teachers think we do, is your unused sick leave credit. We don't have any idea of what that is until your prior and last employer tells us in writing on our forms what you earned at those locations. So if you haven't done so already and you're near retirement, you may want to go to all the other systems you've been to, if any, you know, other than the one you're currently working for, and ask them to complete an unused sick leave certification form. And they can either do the old-fashioned kind of form, or they can send it to us via email. We do have a digitized form that they can fill out, or that you could send to them. You know, this would be the benefits or payroll person at the central office of where you work. They would fill it out and either mail it or email it back to TRS. Your current employer, assuming it's your last one, we can obtain their data electronically. And you just indicate that you want us to pursue it with your last employer, and we will. And when you apply for retirement, you click a button, and that'll tell us to request that sick leave from that last employer, and we obtain it from them electronically. Unfortunately, we can only do it that way for your last employer. All the other ones, if there are any, have to do it kind of in the old-fashioned way. So once we gather all that information from all your last employer and any previous ones, that's the number we would use in the actual formula. But for estimate purposes, you know, the better estimate you can make of your total unused sick leave, the more accurate your estimate's going to be. So it does pay to find out what you've earned at these other places, add them up, see what you've earned currently with your last employer, and that's the time you plug into your estimate here. And then anticipated other service would be like if you were planning to buy service, something called a service purchase, which we'll talk about later, you could add those years in just to see how much more money you'd make if you made that service purchase. Okay. And you can get multiple estimates. So a lot of people might get an estimate without the service purchase and an estimate with the service purchase, and they can see how much extra they get by buying the time, and then they can decide if it's worth spending the money to buy the time. All right. The middle section here shows that this gentleman's considering buying a refunded service, which we'll talk about. And it shows that John Smith is the beneficiary. Okay, Karen, you can go to the next slide, which is the bottom half of the estimate. You can see Jacob is the retiree, John's the beneficiary, and this would be his monthly benefit under all the different options that we talked about a few minutes ago, and you can see how the benefits reduced. So for example, the most he can get is the $38.14. If he wanted option 2, the benefit would drop about $300 a month. But if Jacob dies in retirement, John would get that same amount of money, the $35.09. So John really benefits from option 2 selection. How does option 2 pop-up work? Well, you can see that to add the pop-up reduced Jacob's benefit by about $80 a month. But in the event that John dies first, Jacob's benefit would pop up from that $34.32 amount to the $38.14, so almost $400. Option 3 works the same way. Option 4, typically you would see zeros there. If you want an option 4 benefit, you would tell us up front, and then we would plug in whatever benefit amount you wanted to go to the beneficiary, and you could see what impact it would have. But in this example on your screen, you can see Jacob decided to leave John $100 a month, and that lowered Jacob's benefit from $38.14 to $38.05, so about $9 less per month per $100 that he wants to leave John. So let's look at John's line. You can see that he gets $0 a month if Jacob took maximum plan or option 1. But if you go to option 3, you can see that if Jacob passes away, John's going to get half the amount Jacob got. And that middle line shows you how much plop costs per $1,000. So you see it varies a little bit depending on the option you select. So if you wanted a $100,000 plop and you took the maximum plan, it would be $800 less per month. $8 times 100, $800 less per month for a $100,000 plop. So that's how you read a benefit estimate. And you can get these from us when you're within 5 years. We do recommend that you get one when you're at 2 years, because then it's a more accurate estimate because you're closer to the date. Plus, there's still plenty of time to deal with any issues that you might see. If something doesn't look right, there's still plenty of time to investigate it and get it fixed prior to your retirement. If you wait right till the end, you might have to delay a retirement or some such thing. Okay, Karen, you can go to the next slide. So start thinking about which is the best option for you. You don't actually have to make your selection until you're within 6 months of your planned retirement date. In fact, we wouldn't take a selection prior to that point in time. The window to go online and submit your application is 6 months prior to your plan date to 2 months prior to your planned date of retirement. So it's really a 4-month window you'd want to go online and make your decisions. Now, technically, you can go up to the last day of the month in which you retire to make your selection, but it takes us about 2 months to process these applications. So you might be 2 months before you get your first check. So the whole idea is that, you know, you give us enough time to get your first check to you right when it's due. Now, it would be retroactive if it's late, but if you retire on your job and never apply thinking the money's just going to accumulate in some piggy bank, it won't. So that's happened to a couple people where they just assumed, you know, they'd wait a few years, then retire and get all this money at one time. And it doesn't work that way. We are doing in-person counseling sessions now. So if you want to get a benefit estimate, you can schedule appointments online on the TRS website. You do have to have an account. If you don't have an account yet, you need your TRS ID number. If you don't have that, you can call TRS and they'll give it to you. You create your own password, user ID, and then you can do what's called generate benefit estimate. You can do those under your own. You can schedule an appointment to come into the Atlanta office. I don't know where all, if you're close to Atlanta, but we do also have outreach where we go into counties, but it's a random process. You can sign up for any county. It doesn't matter where you work. The other thing is we do virtual counseling, just like we're doing this virtual workshop. So whatever suits your fancy, you can set it up that way. If you are near Atlanta, you can come into the Atlanta office. We're just north of the Georgia Tech campus, and a counselor can see you in there. Okay, Karen, you can go to the next slide. Creditable service is part of the benefit formula. Remember, the more of this stuff you have, the larger your benefit's going to be. Next slide. Membership service. This is the credit you get for your day-to-day work. And we award it in 1 month increments. At TRS, we don't think like days in a contract. That doesn't jive with the TRS world. We think, all right, did you work half that month or more? If the answer is yes, you get credit for that month. And we have 9 months in a fiscal year. You know, once you have 9 months, anywhere from July 1 through the end of June, you have 1 full year with TRS. If you're academic faculty with Board of Regents, it's just an 8-month year. So even though you're working 10 months, 11 months, or 12 months, you're not getting extra TRS credit for that, but you do get credit if it's part of your high 24 months of salary. All right, next slide. Sick leave accruals. Most school systems award 1 1/4 days of sick per month per your contract type. So if you're a 10-month classroom teacher, you're getting 12.5 days a year. If you're like an admin principal kind of person, you're getting 15 days accrued a year. So in a backdoor kind of way, if you're most of your career is as like an administrator for 12 months a year, you could earn like another half year or more of service through unused sick leave credit, assuming, you know, that you're not using your sick. So you are getting a little bit more money from us because you're working more of the year, provided you don't use up your sick leave. You're not going to see your sick leave credit on your very first retirement check. We collect sick leave information right after you've officially retired, or that's when we process it. And then we add it to your total, and then we retroactively pay you for the 1 or 2 checks we missed. And then all the future checks have sick leave included in them. Okay, next slide. If sick leave records are missing, it's not a big deal. We have found a compromise where we take the records that are available and compute your average number of unused days per year based on the available records. And then we apply that unused average amount to the period of time for which records are missing. So we take the recorded days, add them to estimated days, and then we get your total, and that's what we stick into the formula. So you can go to the next slide, Karen. So we add up all your days, and then we go to the chart, and you can see you need at least 60 days to get any credit. If your school system reports your sick time in hours, you would divide it by 8 to get the number of days. So 60 to 69 is 3 months extra credit. And remember that we have a 9-month year, which is nice with sick leave because it doesn't take 12 months to get a year of credit. It only takes 9. So if you had the 3 months, we would add 1/3 of a year to your total. Or digitally, that would be 0.333 years added to whatever your total was. And then we put that extra increment into the formula to generate a higher benefit. So if you had 170 to 189 days, that would be 1 year, 1.0 years is added. So a lot of teachers will work 29 and they'll have a year or more of sick leave and they get up to 30 plus, and then they retire without actually having had to work a full 30 years. Your other option obviously would be to work the 30 years and then get a benefit based on 31 years of service. You can go all the way up to 40 years of service under the formula. So when you add time worked plus service purchases, which we'll talk about, plus unused sick, you can get up to 40 years. Anything you do over 40, we can't count. We've had some people, work more than that, which is fine. You just can't get more than 80% of your high average salary. Quite often I see regular classroom teachers with 2 or more years of unused sick. That's pretty common. So you just work 28 and have 2 years of sick and get out with 30 years of total service. So we always stress with new teachers, don't use your sick leave unless you have to, because it's worth quite a bit, at the end of your career. Okay, Karen, you can go to the next slide. Okay, service purchases. As the name implies, this is time you can buy. If it's related to teaching, most likely it's something you can purchase, but the law specifically delineates, what's available. As the name implies, it also costs money. So you have to do a cost benefit analysis to see if it makes sense to you. But I can tell you there are some scenarios where it's very cost benefit favorable to you, and other scenarios where you might want to pass. But this might be an area where you'd want to seek help. We can tell you what it costs, but we're not in a position to give you specific financial advice in terms of whether you should or should not buy it. That would come from a licensed advisor. Now, even if you get a service purchase cost calculation, you're never under any obligation to buy this stuff. So it never hurts if you're eligible to get that cost calculation and then decide if it makes sense for you. Okay, Karen. A real common one is TRS withdrawn service. That's where you worked for a while and you quit. And when you quit, you withdrew the money in your bucket. And in those scenarios, you decide at some point later on to come back to TRS covered work. Once you've come back and worked at least 3 years, you can buy the time you cashed out on by simply giving us back the money we gave you plus interest for the time you had that money. And I can tell you that one, if you have any of this withdrawn, has a very, very favorable cost benefit analysis to you. So seriously consider buying it back if you have any of that. Now, the longer you wait to buy any of this back, the more it's going to cost, because it goes up about 7.5% a year. So act sooner than later because of that. Another common one is out-of-state service, where you worked at a public school in another state. You can't get a pension from both states, but this works real well if, say, you have a year or two in Alabama or 3 years in California, wherever you taught in the US, or at a Department of Defense base. You can buy up to 10 years of that out-of-state time and add it to your Georgia time. So if you do have, say, a year in Texas or whatever, it may very well be worth your time to convert it to Georgia time, because 1 year in some other state doesn't generate any pension benefit income, but Georgia law allows you to convert it to Georgia time. Now, there are other things too, the other service purchases that we're not going to delve into, but like if you were active duty military, you can buy up to 5 years of that. There's something called airtime, where to get out sooner, you can buy up to 3 years of airtime in conjunction with a retirement, but it's very, very expensive. You can buy Georgia private school, but it's very, very expensive. If you were a state employee, you can buy ERS time, like if you were with Department of DFACS, for example. Some teachers come from DFACS, and you can buy the DFACS time and convert it to TRS because it's ERS time. So we do have a lot more about service purchases on the web. We also have this is a picture of our members guide, which has recently been updated and has been posted on the website. So you could go under publications and download this. It's got that sick leave chart we looked at earlier. So I do recommend that you download this and print it off or read it, on your computer screen. And it'll cover a lot of what I discussed today. Okay, Karen, next slide. So with service purchases, if you do buy time, you can get out earlier because it counts just like time in the classroom or, TRS covered work. Some people buy it to avoid that early retirement penalty we talked about. Obviously, it increases your benefit, and get it sooner than later. Okay, you can advance the slide. Remember to gather your sick leave forms from all your prior employers, not your last one, and get them to us. Makes sense to do it now, so you don't have to do it all right at the end. If you do have a prior cost calculation, you may want to get an updated one. You just call and ask for it. If you want to buy time from another state, that I've seen take a couple of years to execute. Some, might work real soon, but a lot of times you have to work with that out-of-state system to get them to send in stuff timely and have it sent in the format that we need. So don't think you can do this a couple days before you plan to retire and get it done. You'd want to allow yourself considerable leeway and advance time to get these things executed. Okay, Karen, next slide. This is our last topic of the day, and then if there's time per Karen, we can take some questions. We're going to talk about beneficiaries. Next slide. There's two kinds of beneficiaries. Primary and secondary. Primary are the only ones that can get a monthly benefit. So if you want multiple people to get a monthly benefit when you pass away, those folks have to be listed in the primary section. Some people think when primaries die, secondaries start getting a lifetime benefit. That's not how it works, with one very rare exception. So what secondary beneficiaries get is any money that might be left in your bucket when your primary beneficiary is deceased. So your primary might pass away before all the money in your bucket's used up. And remember, we never keep any of the money in your bucket. So if you and your primary are deceased, we would then start paying out any money that's still in your bucket to that secondary beneficiary in a lump sum. So you can see it's important that you have not only a primary, but also a secondary, and that they are different people. All right, next slide. If you die in active service, that means you die while you're working. You're also an active TRS member 4 years after you leave. After you, some people quit, some people leave, they're vested, they have 10 or more years of service and they're going to get a benefit, but they're not yet 60. So, you know, they just quit employment and they're waiting to turn 60. And we have about 15,000 teachers who are in that boat. And for those first 4 years after they quit and wait, they're still considered active. So what I'm about to tell you applies to all those people. So if you're not vested and you pass away in active service, all we can do is refund the money that's in your bucket. All right. However, you have added protection for your family if you have 10 or more years, then you're vested. If you die in active service, your primary beneficiary could take option 2, or they could take the money in your bucket. All things being equal, they'd get far more money over their lifetime taking option 2, but legally they have to be given a choice of one or the other. You know, a teacher maybe after 30 years might have around $100,000 in his or her bucket. They could either do that, or the average annual pension benefits like I think $38,000 a year, and that would be for the rest of their life. So you can see it would only take about 3 years to get more money out of the lifetime pension than taking the bucket money. Now, in the rare scenario where when you die, there is no surviving primary beneficiary and it's a death in active service, then we would convert the secondary beneficiary to a primary and give them the same choice that the primary would have had. And when would this scenario happen? Well, let's say it's a car accident. And you know, you're in your car with your spouse who's your beneficiary, you die in the same accident, then we would go to your secondary and convert them. Now, it doesn't work this way in retirement. It's only when it's in active service death. Okay, Karen. The next couple of slides, I'll just kind of summarize. Once you've retired, there's no voluntary changes that are available. There are qualifying events like a death or divorce that would allow you to make some limited changes. You can't voluntarily just decide, oh, I picked the wrong option, or oh, I want to change my beneficiaries. There is no opportunity to do that. So it's real important that you're comfortable with your choice. And once you send it to us, it's a binding contract, and it's not something, you know, that can be easy. It can't be changed. If you do have a death or divorce, certain limited changes can be made. And when you have multiple beneficiaries, the choices or change opportunities are even less. And that's, Karen, the next slide. If you have multiple beneficiaries, one thing that is kind of counterintuitive that I should throw out there is that, let's say you have 3 kids and you leave each of the children 1/3 of your benefit and you retire. And then during your retirement, one of those children passes away before you. Well, you might think that we then automatically adjust what's going to the remaining 2 kids to 50% from 1/3. No, we don't do that. It stays at 1/3. Okay. There's no pop-up for beneficiaries. If there is a divorce, You can delete the divorced spouse, and then you can reallocate that benefit among or between the other beneficiaries. Now, in all cases, we recalculate your benefit, and it may very well go down. So a lot of people will get a benefit estimate before they make the change, and then they decide if it's something they want to do. Okay, next slide. We have to go with the beneficiaries you designated on file. Things like wills, divorce decrees, remarriages have no bearing on who we pay. This is not a probate process, it's a contract process. So it's real important that if you have a change, that you make a change of mind on beneficiaries, you make the changes on our forms, because that's what we're going to go with. And you can do it online or on a paper form. If you get a divorce and you want to change beneficiaries, don't forget to do it, because if you pass away and you left the old divorced spouse on there, we have to pay the original spouse. All right. If you want to designate a minor child, that's fine. We would, however, require that the court appoint a legal guardian for that child, and we would pay the guardian on behalf of that child until they're an adult. Okay, Karen, next slide. So make sure your beneficiaries are up to date. If you want to change them, do it now. Once you put it on your forms for retirement, you can't make changes, all right? Okay, next slide. Our website is trsga.com, and it's very robust. You can do a lot of things on it. That's where you're going to go to do your retirement application. Remember, we're not going to be able to give you specific financial advice. The first place I always suggest teachers go to, if you're in a 403B through your school system, you can get free advice from the licensed advisors who work for your 403B, whether it's VALIC or it's now AIG, Lincoln Financial, Fidelity, for TIA, for example. Whoever your school uses, that's a good first place to go. Your benefit payments are all via direct deposit. So you're going to give us that information on your retirement application. Your very first check is deposited the middle of the month in which you retire, and subsequent checks are typically the first business day of the month for that month. Okay, next slide. We're all over social media. If you want to get your camera out and take a picture of any of those QR codes, it'll take you to those various locations where you can utilize TRS information on those websites. Okay, next slide. And that means we're done, and it's time for you to get excited about your retirement. And with that, Karen, is there any time for questions?
Does anybody have a burning question? There was one in the chat that I think we answered about a maximum amount of sick days that can be credited towards retirement. And the answer is
there's no limit, but it is capped altogether at 40.
40 years of
Totally, right.
Right, sick days from 40 years of service.
Yeah.
Any other burning questions, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues? Mike, thank you. And again, I'll send out a copy of your PowerPoint slides and your contact information. If you haven't figured out, like, you should be making all these different accounts to sign up and start doing this now, I hope you will. And if you are feeling overwhelmed, I apologize for that, but I hope you see that retirement isn't just as simple as going in and handing in your resignation. their letter. There is a lot of prep work, a lot of thought process to be done prior. Two things, I hope you will join us for our next pre-retirement seminar. Again, we do all of these on Saturday mornings, and this will be November 12th. And then lastly, in addition to looking through my email in the next week or so, it'll include information about becoming a pre-retired member of the retired organization. And you can do that now as an active member. And you can make some monthly payments over the next year to, excuse me, fulfill your lifetime GAE retired membership, membership dues costs. So I thank you for being here this morning and into the afternoon. I know it is a ton of information. I hope you felt that this was beneficial, and thank you for what you do for public education each and every day. And for those of you who are GAE members, thank you so much of being part of the oldest education organization in the state of Georgia and being a member of NEA, the largest education organization in the nation. So thank you so much, and I wish you all a great weekend. Go forth, get some lunch, and enjoy the rest of the weekend. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.